Chapter 2002. Hong En's brows furrowed, but they soon relaxed. It's just a small injury. You'll recover in 10 days to half a month. As he spoke, he looked at the injured youth. Do you want to leave the mountain and give up the chance to enter the divine ruins world, or continue to persevere? Choose for yourself. Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. These words were too interesting. Those who came here were all aiming for the divine ruins world. He deliberately said this, so of course it would make people waver. Sure enough, when the young man who was still hesitating heard this, his expression immediately became more determined. I choose to stay. Although the injuries on his body were not light, he would definitely be able to fully recover within a month, if he took good care of himself. It was not easy for him to pass the trial and come to the top of the heavenly Yin mountain. If he gave up and chose to leave, he was really unwilling. Hearing his answer, Hong En's face revealed a trace of admiration. That's right. It was not easy to become an expert. One had to put in a lot of effort and pay a price. If one was timid and hesitant because of a small matter, then in the future, there would be no future to speak of. These words caused the expressions of many people around to change. Wasn't this implying them? However, Hong En's status was noble, and his words were not completely unreasonable, so everyone fell silent. All right, let's all stay here. Hong En looked around, and after saying this, he walked to the side. This time, he did not go up again. Instead, he stood not far away from the crowd. It seemed that he was planning to guard them strictly. The crowd did not say anything else, and returned to their positions, waiting quietly. Xilan tugged at Ziji's sleeve and lowered her voice. Big brother, I think this place is really strange. Why don't we go back? Of course, Ziji would not agree. For this trial, they had prepared for so long and sacrificed so much. How could they give up just like that? Seeing that Xilan seemed to be a little afraid, Ziji patted her hand and patiently persuaded her. All right, Xilan, don't think so much. Isn't Lord Hong En right next to us? He'll definitely be fine. Xilan's lips moved. Seeing her big brother's determined expression, she knew that she would not be able to persuade him. Therefore, he had no choice but to give up. Got it. Ziji patted her head in relief before retracting his gaze. However, this consolation did not make Xilan feel at ease. She lowered her head and wrung her hands together. Big brother didn't know, but she did. Someone must have ambushed her just now. Furthermore, the other party's strength was definitely above hers. No, it should be said that the other party was above Hong En. To be able to avoid his scrutiny and make a move silently, twice at that, it was simply terrifying. Of course she wanted to go to the Divine Ruins realm, but she had to be alive first. Xilan was full of anxiety. Her mind was a mess. She couldn't calm down to cultivate, so she had to look around from time to time. Many of the other people present had the same thoughts as her. Those who could come here were no ordinary people. There were some things that when one thought about it carefully, one would vaguely sense that something was wrong, which would then make one's back feel cold. Just like that, a day slowly passed amidst everyone's uneasiness and suspicion. In the blink of an eye, it was the night of the second day. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her eyes closed. When the moon rose into the sky, that familiar feeling came again. This time, she was prepared, so she sensed that something was wrong the moment the force in her body was devoured. Her heart skipped a beat. There was a Xian formation under the mountain rock. It wasn't obvious yesterday, but today the energy fluctuation was as clear as day. She didn't know if it was originally like this, or if Hong En had done something out of worry. However, no matter what, Chu Luiyue finally confirmed her previous guess. The corner of her lips lifted slightly, and an extremely faint smile flashed across her face, which disappeared in an instant. The moon was high in the sky, and the night breeze was cool. Everyone's hearts, which had been hanging for half a day, finally gradually calmed down. It seemed that yesterday's incident was really just an accident. However, their happiness didn't last long, as another youth's body shook and directly vomited blood. Puff! Bang! That youth's face turned pale, and he fell to the ground with a dull thud. This was especially clear on the originally quiet mountain top. Third brother. A slightly older young man next to him was shocked, and hurriedly went forward to help him. Third brother. What happened to you? Everyone looked over, and when they saw the messy dark red bloodstains on the youth's face and body, their expressions changed. Hong-an also rushed over immediately. What happened? The youth propped himself up. His mouth was full of blood, and his face was pale. I. He had just said 2 words when he coughed violently. That wretched appearance was truly frightening to look at. The youth beside him first took his pulse, and then his expression turned ugly. Third brother has suffered internal injuries, and I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to recover without a month or 2. As he spoke, he directly tore apart the youth's clothes. There was a purplish-red mark on his back. It was obvious that this was a newly added scar, and it was also this force that caused him to suffer internal injuries. When the youth heard this, his expression turned even darker. 1 or 2 months, this was still optimistic. In any case, no matter what, there was no way to continue participating in this trial. Dragging a sick body to the divine ruins world, wasn't that courting death? Hong-an's brows were also furrowed, and a fire burned wildly in his heart. How could this be? He had been waiting by the side, and guarding very carefully. If these people did anything, he would definitely be the first to notice. But now things had happened just like that, and he had not noticed at all. The surroundings were silent. Everyone's gaze moved back and forth between Hong-an and the youth with different expressions. Hong-an felt like there was a blade on his back. There could be 1 or 2, but not 3. The same thing was happening again, and each time it was more serious than the last. It was obvious that the people present were already wavering. It was definitely impossible to use the previous excuse to fool them. The youth hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, Lord Hong-an, I want to bring third brother down the mountain. His injuries can't be delayed. The youth immediately dissuaded him. Second brother, I can go down by myself, don't delay you. How can you do it by yourself like this? The youth interrupted him, not allowing him to say anything. Although it was a pity to give up this opportunity, his third brother's life was more important. Hong-an took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. You don't have to leave. I'll bring you to a place to recuperate. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2003. The moment these words were spoken, everyone was taken aback. Hong-an stood up and waved his sleeves. The surrounding red barrier instantly dissipated. Immediately after, a wooden tablet flew out of his hand. Buzz! Following the buzzing sound, a huge silver barrier appeared before everyone's eyes. A powerful aura continued to spread out from above. Everyone on the top of the mountain was stunned by this scene. Their faces were filled with astonishment and shock. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up. It's here. Behind this barrier is a small, independent space. It is also the closest existence to the Divine Ruins world, which is only a single gate away from it. Only by passing through this barrier and entering can you truly see the Door Realm and step into the Divine Ruins world. Originally, this barrier should only open after a month, but since you don't want to stay here anymore, why don't you go ahead of time? With just a few words, everyone's heart surged. This heavenly mountain was quite strange. Strange things happen frequently, and they couldn't stay any longer. If they could enter ahead of time, it would naturally be best. Hong-an looked at the 2 brothers. In that small space, the energy of heaven and earth is abundant, and there are many heavenly materials and earthly treasures. After you go, you can take good care of yourself. When your body recovers, you can leave at any time. Of course, if you still want to go to the Divine Ruins world at that time, you still have the opportunity. Thank you, Lord Hong-an. When the 2 brothers heard this, they immediately became excited and happy, thanking him repeatedly. There was no better result than this. Hong-an waved his hand. In fact, he was very annoyed. He should have brought these people here for a month, but only 2 days had passed. He didn't get anything, and he had to send them in. He had really suffered a huge loss this time, but in the current situation, there was really no better solution. If he suffered a loss, so be it, as long as it didn't affect the overall situation. Moreover, there were a few good people in this batch. In the end, there might even be a reward. Thinking of this, his mood finally became a little better. He took the lead and flew in front of the silver barrier. Now everyone line up and enter in order. Almost immediately someone stepped forward. I'll go first. Such a great opportunity was really tempting to them. Who didn't want to be first? Who didn't want to become stronger? In the face of huge benefits and temptations, almost no one could remain rational. Apart from Hong'an, there were only 50 people here. The process progressed very quickly. In just a short while, a third of them had already entered. The young man supported his younger brother and followed in. Everyone could see the excitement on their faces. Rongxiu chuckled. Even after suffering such serious injuries, you still refuse to give up. You're really amazing. Chu Luiyue looked on coldly. She rarely helped strangers. The main reason he made a move this time was to find out Hong'an's plan. They had already gone this far, but the two brothers still chose to stay. No one could help him in this situation. Shall we go too? He Ziji said. Subconsciously, he looked at Rongxiu and Li Tianlan. For some reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of security when he followed them. His island's feet seemed to be nailed to the ground. Big brother, can we not go in? I keep feeling that something is wrong. Iziji only thought that she was still worried about what happened before. So he said, there's nothing wrong. You're just scaring yourself. Don't worry. I'm here to protect you, okay? His island stomped her feet. She also knew that it was impossible to stop now. Unable to persuade her big brother, she could only agree. At this time, more than half of the people had already entered. Chu Luiyue laughed and looked at Rongxiu. Let's go. Let's see what kind of world it is inside. Rongxiu nodded and held her hand. The two walked side by side. Iziji and his sister followed closely behind. After experiencing so many things before, they had now subconsciously regarded Rongxiu and Li Tianlan as their backbone. The small boat arrived in front of the silver boundary. The soft and fine hair on his forehead covered his eyebrows and eyes. Therefore, at this time, no one saw his slightly frowning eyebrows and the hesitation and disgust that quickly flashed in his eyes. What's wrong? Hong'an stood in front of the boundary. Seeing the small boat stop, he felt strange and asked, Are you going back on your word this time? He had a deep impression of this golden-haired young man. If not for the fact that his talent and strength were really outstanding, he would not have given him face before. I'm telling you this time, there's no chance to go back on your word. Do you understand? Hong'an was very annoyed by these things. What little patience he had left had long been exhausted when he opened the enchantment. So at this time, he was not polite when talking to the small boat. The small boat's eyes flashed and he nodded gently. I know. With that, he directly lifted his foot and stepped into the boundary. On the boundary, a wave flashed and disappeared in a flash. Hong'an glanced at it and inexplicably felt that something was wrong. But he could not tell what was going on. Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice rang out, interrupting his train of thought. Lord Hong, and is really kind to open the boundary in advance for everyone. Chu Luiyue had a smile on his face, as if he was very grateful. I really don't know how to thank you. Seeing that it was her, Hong'an's face looked better and he chuckled. It's nothing, it's what I should do. After all, those gathered here are all top cultivation geniuses. He lifted his chin. You guys go in quickly too. Chu Luiyue responded, and was about to lift her foot when she suddenly stopped. She looked up and looked at the center of the boundary. There, a wooden tablet was floating quietly. This was thrown out by Hong'an just now. This huge boundary was also summoned by it. Hong'an followed her gaze and frowned slightly. What's wrong? What's so good about this wooden tablet? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up and said with a faint smile. Nothing. I just feel that Lord Hong'an, your wooden tablet looks a little familiar. Digression. Come at 6 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2004. Hong'an immediately became alert. Oh, you've seen it before? Chu Luiyue smiled. Back then, I inadvertently saw a similar wooden plaque in a small stall. At first glance, it really does look quite similar. But that was far from being as exquisite as yours. If you look closely, the shape is also not quite the same. Hong'an's hanging heart was finally at ease. So that was it. What kind of good thing could a stall have? It was most likely just a wooden plaque that happened to look similar. After all, Things like wooden tokens generally didn't have much of a difference. You're of noble status, so the things you carry are naturally extraordinary. How can those crude things compare to them? Chu Liyue's calm words completely dispelled Hong An's suspicions. He laughed. All right, they're all trivial things. There's nothing to be concerned about. Hurry up and go in. Don't delay. Chu Liyue readily agreed. Rong Xiao took a step forward. When he passed through the barrier, his eyelids drooped slightly, and a trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. You are. He turned around and called out. Chu Liyue held his hand and followed him in. A thin ripple spread out into the surroundings. Rong Xiao calmly raised his hand. The ripple was instantly annihilated and completely dissipated. It was as if it had never appeared. The entire process took only a moment. Hong An's gaze happened to be elsewhere, so he did not notice it at all. The two figures quickly disappeared into the barrier. Iziji and his sister quickly followed after them. After passing through the barrier, Chu Liyue stood still and looked ahead. The mountains were lush and verdant. There was a valley below, and a river meandered through it. The energy of heaven and earth was abundant. It was not inferior even to the Yuntian Tower. But this was not what surprised Chu Liyue the most. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she stared fixedly at the scenery in the distance. The sky was blue, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. A curtain of light fell from the sky. It really was the Gate Realm. Everyone that had arrived successively were all stunned on the spot when they saw this scene. Their hearts were filled with excitement as they looked at the door of the light curtain that was like a miracle, and their eyes were filled with excitement. Gate Realm. Was that the Gate Realm? Lord Hongyan is right. The heaven and earth energy here is many times more abundant than outside. As long as we pass through that Tao Gate world, we should be able to reach the Divine Ruins world, right? This place is already such a fairyland-like existence. I really wonder what kind of scene it would be inside the Divine Ruins world. All sorts of discussions could be heard. Most of them were sighs and yearning. Obviously, everything before their eyes had a huge impact on them. Even He Xilan, who was a little reluctant before, was shocked when she came in and saw this scene. She couldn't help but sigh. So this is how it is inside. After being stunned for a short while, she shook Hiziji's arm excitedly. Big brother. Luckily we didn't leave. Otherwise it would be a huge loss. This trial was indeed worthy of its reputation. Hiziji's face was also filled with unconcealable excitement. Otherwise, why would there be so many cultivators coming here one after another? Such a cultivation treasure land is hard to come by. Yes. Outside the Divine Ruins world, how could there be such a cultivation place that is comparable to the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world? Chu Liyue's expression was slightly restrained as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why countless cultivators yearned for the Divine Ruins world was because it was rich in heaven and earth energy and had all kinds of resources. Outside the Divine Ruins world, it was almost impossible to break through to the high god level. However, if there was such a cultivation environment, what was the difference between it and the Divine Ruins world? That Tao Gate world could even be considered as a meaningless decoration. The appearance of such a place was obviously abnormal. Rong Xiao squeezed her palm. Be careful. There are high gods here. And there is more than one. The voice entered her ears and knocked on her heart. Chu Liyue nodded without batting an eyelid. The moment she entered this place, she sensed several obscure yet powerful auras around her. However, because she had not broken through to the high god level, she did not dare to be very sure. However, since Rong Xiao said so, the more Chu Liyue looked, the more she felt that this place was strange. At this moment Hongyan, who was the last person, also entered the boundary. He raised his hand and put away the wooden token. However, the boundary behind him did not dissipate. This was because it existed in the first place. The wooden token just summoned it. Suddenly, a figure flew over from the mountain top in the distance. That person was extremely fast. In a few breaths, he was in front of everyone. It was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He was dressed in a black robe and had a tall figure. There was a scar on his face. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. He was also a high god expert. Hongyan, why did you let him in so early? Scarface frowned. His originally stern and cold face became even more ferocious. The crowd, who were originally full of excitement, quieted down when they heard this and looked at each other in dismay. Who was this person? Why did it seem like he did not welcome them? Hongin stepped forward. Something happened at Heavenly Een Mountain, so I brought them here in advance. Since they were going to come here in the end, it shouldn't matter if they came earlier. As he spoke, he gave Scarface a look. However, Scarface did not fall for it. His frown deepened. What problem could there be at Heavenly Een Mountain? Even if there was, you should have sent a message back first. How could you bring them here so rashly? Being reprimanded in front of everyone, Hong An's face was a little embarrassed. The expression on his face also faded. These are all extremely talented cultivators. Some of them are even outstanding. If Master sees them, he will definitely be happy. At the mention of Master, Scarface was clearly a lot more afraid. He looked at everyone again and said impatiently, "You brought them here. You're the one who brought them here. You're responsible." With that, he turned around and left. Hongin gritted his teeth. He wanted to curse, but he held back in the end. At this time, there was no need to waste his mood on such trivial matters. However, the conversation between the two aroused the suspicion of many people. "Master? What master?" Xilan asked in a daze. "Big brother, aren't we going to the Divine Ruins world? Why did a master suddenly appear?" From what Hongin said, could it be that they were going to meet that master? He didn't say anything about this before. Iziji shook his head and motioned for her not to speak. In fact, he also felt a little uneasy at this moment. After Scarface left, the scene fell into a strange silence. Hongin turned around and did not seem to have noticed this strange change as he said, "That's right. Everyone, please follow me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network." Chapter 2005. No one moved. At this point, if they still couldn't see the problem, they would really be stupid. "Lord Hongin, where exactly is this place? Who is your so-called master?" Someone boldly asked. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hongin. He chuckled. "Where is this place? Don't all of you see it clearly? This is a small space that is close to the Divine Ruins world. As for the master, it's naturally the master. I've never said that I'm a rogue cultivator, right?" Seeing that everyone was on alert, he secretly cursed Scarface in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "To be honest, we were originally a force in the Divine Ruins world. However, we are only a branch here. Regarding the trial, to be honest, we have our own selfish motives. Our goal is to attract everyone here. After all, everyone present is a top genius. If you can join us, it will definitely be like adding wings to a tiger." Hearing this, the expressions of many people present eased a lot. So he wanted to recruit people. If that was the case, it wasn't difficult to understand. However, if that's the case, Lord Hongin can explain it in advance. Why? Why was there a need to be so secretive and almost cause a misunderstanding? Hongin smiled. "You may not know, but the Divine Ruins world has its own rules. It's not appropriate to recruit people from outside, so we naturally can't make a big fuss. I originally wanted to bring you in and count you as a member of the Divine Ruins world before recruiting. I didn't expect that I didn't make this clear and almost caused a misunderstanding." His attitude was very sincere, and his tone was calm and patient. Many people immediately chose to believe him. After all, no matter what, his strength was here. Moreover, the heaven and earth energy here was abundant, and it was indeed a good place to cultivate. Why would such a powerful existence deceive them? Of course, if you don't like it, you can choose other sects after entering the Divine Ruins world. We won't stop you. Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. What a nice way to put it. These people had never been to the Divine Ruins world, so they knew nothing about the situation there. In fact, the Divine Ruins world was vast, and the major families and sects were all separated by a great distance. If he were to go there rashly, he would probably die on the streets before he could even figure out what was going on. If that was the case, anyone who had some understanding of the Divine Ruins world would know how absurd and laughable it was. However, if the people present knew about this, they wouldn't have participated in this so-called trial in the first place. So that's how it is. It seems that we have misunderstood you. The person who raised the question first apologized profusely. The attitude of the remaining people also changed. The never-before-seen cultivation ground and the continuous appearance of high gods were very confusing. Chu Luiyue wanted to speak, but after careful consideration, he decided to wait and see. She wanted to see if the person behind all of this was what she thought. It's your first time here, so please follow me to rest. Seeing that everyone had been appeased, Hong'an finally felt relieved. He turned around and flew towards a mountain peak. Everyone followed closely behind. 15 minutes later, they arrived at one of the mountain peaks. During this journey, they didn't encounter anyone else. Everyone, please stay here for the time being. The door realm will open in a month, and everyone will go there again. At this point, everyone basically believed Hong'an's words and expressed their approval of this proposal. The mountain peak was tall and handsome, more than enough to accommodate 50 people. Hong'an even specially gave the injured youth a good medicinal pill to let him recuperate. This series of actions naturally made everyone more convinced of him. After doing this, Hong'an planned to turn around and leave. However, just as he took a step, the sky suddenly darkened. Chu Luiyue looked up. Above the clear and cloudless sky, dark clouds were rapidly converging. Her heart sank. This scene looked inexplicably familiar. What's going on? Xilan asked softly. Could it be that some heaven and earth treasure is about to appear? Haha. Everyone, don't worry. It's just that someone on that mountain peak is about to break through. Hong'an raised his hand and pointed to the mountain peak beside him and laughed. There's a barrier around this mountain peak, so it won't be affected. As he spoke, dark clouds gathered and wind and thunder rumbled. Someone murmured in shock. Such a big movement. Is someone about to break through to the high god level? Many people looked envious when they heard this. Hong'an's eyes flashed. In the divine ruins world, it's normal to break through to the high god level. With everyone's talent, if you cultivate here for a while, you might be able to break through the shackles. His words made many people's hearts burn with excitement. Chu Luiyue looked up at the darkening sky and narrowed her eyes. From the looks of it, they didn't seem to have been summoned by the other side. Rumble. A sudden clap of thunder rolled out from the layers of clouds. It was deafening. Then, everyone saw a silver snake-like Tianlei gathering quickly. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The Tianlei was coming for them. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, the powerful Tianlei came crashing down. It was heading straight for them. She quickly turned her head and saw that Hong'an had retreated far away. Digression. 6:30 p.m. 5th update. I don't think there's a catch-up today. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2006. Everyone's expressions changed drastically when they saw the rapidly descending Tianlei. How was it aimed at the mountain next to them? It was clearly coming for them. When they saw Hong'an, who had unknowingly dodged, a trace of uneasiness appeared in everyone's hearts. Dodge! Someone exclaimed. Not many people would be able to withstand such a bolt of heavenly lightning. Some people quickly rushed out of the mountain, but they were quickly intercepted. Bang! The person who wanted to rush out first was sent flying and fell heavily to the ground. Everyone looked over and saw that a barrier had suddenly appeared outside the mountain. It was the barrier that Hong'an had mentioned earlier. However, at this moment, not only was the barrier unable to protect them, but it also trapped all of them here. Lord Hong'an, what do you mean by this? With danger approaching, everyone became agitated. Hong'an clearly wanted to kill them. What a pity. Hong'an looked down at them with a smile on his face, but his eyes were bloodthirsty, cruel, and indifferent. I didn't want to attack you directly, but unfortunately, you don't have that kind of luck. Previously on Heavenly Een Mountain, strange things happened frequently, and it made his heart beat faster. In the end, he had no choice but to bring them back in advance. Although this could not completely squeeze out their strength, it was quite a loss. However, compared to letting them go, it was much better. Especially when there were a few good seedlings among them. Hearing Hong'an's words and looking at his expression, how could they not understand? He had purposely brought them here, so that he could make a move on them. Boom! Everyone did not have much time to be angry and resentful, because the Tianlei had already struck. As expected, the barrier didn't manage to stop the heavenly lightning. Retreat! Everyone dodged backward. However, the speed of the heavenly lightning was extremely fast, and it contained an extremely terrifying energy. Crack! The Tianlei landed, and a deep gully immediately spread out. The wild energy swept out in all directions. Those who stood closer and did not have time to dodge were the first to bear the brunt of it. Chu Luyue and the others stood further away and dodged quickly, so they were not affected. However, for most of the people present, this was undoubtedly a nightmare. Boom! Before everyone could catch their breath, the Tianlei in the sky was still rapidly emerging. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he was planning to end everyone here. Third brother! A mournful and sorrowful roar sounded. Chu Luyue looked over with a frown. As for the injured youth, because he was too slow in retreating, he was about to be affected by the violent energy waves. Chu Luyue was about to move, but Rong Xiu had already raised his hand. An extremely thin golden thread flew out and wrapped around the youth's ankle. Rong Xiu moved his wrist and instantly brought the young man back. Boom! That power swept over them. The entire ground where the young man had been standing had been lifted up. If that young man hadn't been able to dodge in time, this blow would have taken his life. Third brother! The youth, who thought that his third brother was dead for sure, was surprised and delighted when he saw this. He hurriedly changed direction and ran over. Second brother! The youth was still in a state of shock and looked at him in a daze. Just now, someone had clearly saved him. He lowered his head subconsciously. A thin golden thread flashed past his ankle. The youth looked in the direction of the golden thread. Rong Xiu had already stopped. Thank you. No need. Before the youth could finish speaking, Rong Xiu had already spoken. The reason why he had intervened was because he did not want Yu to feel guilty. After all, she was the one who had injured the youth. Although it was not a big deal, it was somewhat inappropriate for them to lose their lives because of this. Chu Luyue sighed softly. This man, he always knew what she was thinking the best. However, Rong Xiu's action immediately attracted the attention of the people present. This strength, he was clearly much stronger than all of them. While they were still worried that they would be affected by the power of Tianlei and were running away in panic, this man actually had extra strength to save the youth. Hongyan, who was standing in the sky, saw this scene as well. His face was cold at first, then he clapped and laughed. Good. Looks like you're quite strong too. He did not pay much attention to this person before. He did not expect him to be so extraordinary. Looking at his young age, he reckoned that his talent and strength were more outstanding than expected. This was great. The more people like him there were, the more worthwhile this battle would be. Chu Luyue heard Hongyan's laughter and looked up. A cold light flashed in her eyes. Tianlei in the sky was gathering at an even faster speed. Then, 2 more Tianlei struck down in succession. Rong Xiu waved his sleeves and instantly set up a barrier in front of him. Tianlei landed. Someone was affected and let out a shrill cry. Chu Luyue instinctively looked over. Suddenly her gaze froze. The man lying on the ground was affected by the power. He was covered in wounds and did not look like he would survive. However, the blood on his body was quickly absorbed by the ground beneath him. The thick smell of blood filled the air. It was almost nauseating. Countless images flashed through Chu Luyue's mind. Finally it stopped at a familiar scene. That day at Peach Blossom Dock. Didn't the people from Black Sword Sect use the same method to kill those cultivators? She suddenly realized something and looked at Rong Xiu. As expected, this is Black Demon Cave's territory. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2007. Following that, the heavenly lightning bolts bombarded every location on the mountain peak. In a short while the originally handsome and tall mountain peak had become unrecognizable. Ravines crisscrossed and forests collapsed. Shrill and panicked screams came from everywhere, and messy bloodstains covered the mountains and wilderness. Some people were lying on the ground, gradually losing their breath. However, their blood was still rapidly flowing out, soaking into the ground. Chulua looked again, and her pupils suddenly shrank. She saw that those people's bodies were shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, Chulua finally understood something. This was to completely devour the last bit of power in their bodies? No wonder. No wonder the people of Black Demon Cave would hold a so-called trial here, using the Divine Ruins world as bait to deceive all these cultivators. Moreover, they wanted young geniuses. The essence and power seized like this was naturally the most abundant. She had long known that Black Demon Cave's cultivation method was very evil. But now that she saw it, it was 100 times more evil and sinister than she had expected. Not only that, even those people in the Peach Blossom Dock had probably suffered the same torture. She didn't know how long Black Demon Cave had been doing this. And she didn't know how many innocent people had died at their hands. Tianlei continued to fall, and the entire mountain peak was quickly covered by a white light. From the gaps in the flickering light, one could vaguely see the scene of people fleeing in panic. Painful wails could be heard incessantly. Hongan looked down at this scene from above, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Hongan, you're just going to act like this? The commotion here quickly attracted the attention of others. Someone flew up from a nearby mountain peak and looked over in their direction. Hongan crossed his arms and snorted. Among these people, there are a few who don't know what's good for them. The sooner we deal with them, the better. That person nodded in understanding, and then said with some regret, "That's a pity. If you can let these people stay in Heavenly Een Mountain for a month, you can get a lot of commission. Maybe you can take the opportunity to refine a divine body. You have to know that such an opportunity doesn't come by often. If you miss this opportunity, who knows how long you'll have to wait for the next one." Upon hearing this, Hong An's face darkened. This person was right. In the entire sect, the only exit was the Cloud State City. Every once in a while, they would use the Divine Ruins world as an excuse to hold trials outside to attract all kinds of genius cultivators. Every time a trial was held, a different person would be in charge of it. They were the so-called gatekeepers. According to the rules, the cultivators who passed the trial would stay on Heavenly Een Mountain for a month. And during this 1 month, they had set up a Xian formation on Lunar Mountain in advance, which would take the opportunity to devour these people's origin power. After the matter was completed, the gatekeeper would receive a portion of the power as a reward. The more power they devoured, the more benefits the gatekeeper would receive. One had to know that this energy was formed by gathering the origin power of the most talented cultivators. It was extremely pure and precious. If he could get such an opportunity, he might be able to save years, or even decades of cultivation time. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? Every time, the entire sect would engage in an intense competition for this spot. Hongan had spent a lot of effort and thought to get this opportunity. Who knew that it would be wasted just like that? Once they entered the barrier, these people would have to bear the bombardment of Tianlei. Although this could further devour their power, in the process, they would lose a lot of their own power. And the gatekeeper would not be able to get a commission. But the most important thing was that his master valued this very much. If his master knew what he had done, he would definitely be punished. The only thing that made Hongan slightly relieved was that there were a few outstanding people in this group. With the existence of those people, perhaps they could make up for the previous losses and make his master less angry. Hongan held his breath. Such a good opportunity had been wasted. Not to mention a commission, he would thank the heavens if he could escape punishment this time. He didn't know what had happened on Heavenly Een Mountain, right? This matter had to be reported as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Hongan said to that person, "Since you have nothing to do now, help me watch for a while. I'll go and report to my master about the situation on Heavenly Een Mountain." That person had a good relationship with him, so he agreed. His figure moved and quickly came to Hong An's side. "Then go and come back quickly." Hong An nodded and was about to turn and leave. However, just as he took a step, he heard a strange sound coming from the mountain below. Almost at the same time, the people standing next to him gasped in shock. How could this be? Hongyan hurriedly turned his head to look. How? His voice seemed to be suddenly cut off by something, and he stopped abruptly. On the mountain below, under the flickering lightning, a thin figure was faintly discernible. He held a sword in his hand and raised it high above his head. As for the lightning bolts that were descending, they were all swallowed up by the sword. Countless streams of light swam around the thick and deep sword, almost dyeing it into a dazzling snowy color. However, the terrifying power of Tianlei was indeed quickly annihilated by it. With the appearance of this person, the Tianlei that was bombarding indiscriminately was all stopped. Most of the cultivators were protected by this and evacuated to the side together. Except for the few people who unfortunately died because of the sudden incident, most of the remaining people were still alive. That person is. The light flickered, reflecting the soft short golden hair. The veins on Hongyan's forehead throbbed. This person was the golden-haired youth from before. How could he be so strong? He doesn't know what's good for him. Hongyan cursed in a low voice. He wants to show off at this time. He's really tired of living. I'd like to see how long he can be arrogant. The power of Tianlei hadn't been fully displayed yet. As he spoke, several Tianlei in the sky gathered crazily again, and then slashed down one after another. Boom! Boom! For a moment the sky changed color. Hongyan's lips curled into a cold smile. They had prepared the array on this mountain long ago. Once it was activated, it could quickly summon Tianlei. It was impossible for this person to withstand it alone. However, the next scene completely froze Hongyan's smile on his face. Because facing the continuous bombardment of Tianlei, the youth didn't show any fear. Instead, he tightened his grip on the sword in his hand, raised it high, and then slashed it down fiercely. Cloud Sky Copper Sword. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2008. The heavy and majestic longsword suddenly fell. Wherever the sword chi went, the void was torn apart. The violent spatial turbulence raged and surged. Following that, a huge cracking sound came from the mountain. Boom! A ravine spread across the mountain. The huge mountain peak was instantly split into two by this sword. All the Tianlei power was affected by the impact, and was swept away in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the mountain was split in half. Many cultivators stood on one side, while the violent Tianlei power gathered on the other side and raged wildly. Half of the mountain began to be destroyed and collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Rumble! For a moment, the mountain rocks rolled down and dust flew. It was a complete mess all over the mountains and plains. Hongyan was stunned. The scene in front of him was so beyond his expectations that he stood there for a long time, unable to react. However, the person next to him suddenly realized something. No, isn't he a stage 9 martial artist? How can he unleash such shocking power? Looking at his cultivation level, he was indeed not a god-level powerhouse. However, the strength he displayed now was already more powerful than many god-level martial artists. Hongyan's lips trembled. I don't know. Back then, he felt that the golden-haired young man's talent and strength were very outstanding. So he gave him a second chance. Who would have thought that he would end up in such a big mess? Looking at the destroyed half of the mountain, Hongyan's blood froze, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This time, it was really a big mess. If his master pursued this matter, he was afraid that. No, it's fine. It's definitely fine. Hongyan took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Even if he's really a god-level powerhouse, he's definitely not a match for Tianlei. He did not believe that this person could really cause any trouble. As expected, the Tianlei in the sky seemed to have sensed something and quickly began to gather again. Chu Luiyue stood behind the crowd and looked at the thin and tall figure in front of her. She lightly sighed, and her lips curved up into a smile. That's amazing. After not seeing each other for such a long time, Little Boat's strength had already made an extremely shocking leap. Yes, he had yet to break through the threshold of becoming a high god. However, the power stored in his body was comparable to that of a high deity. Although the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was not a peak divine artifact, It was something that Chu Luiyue had spent a great deal of effort to refine. Swords had spirits. In Xiaozhou's hands, this sword could unleash its greatest power. Everyone looked at the small boat gratefully. Clearly his attack had saved many lives. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. He was the one who beat me to it. He clearly saw that the reason why Chang Wanzhou attacked them was because there was a Tianlei coming their way. To be precise, they were here for Chu Luiyue. At that time he was about to make a move, but he did not expect Chang Wanzhou to beat him to it. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Why was he still jealous at a time like this? She had not seen Little Boat for a long time. Little Boat probably did not know her true strength, so he was in a hurry to make a move. His personality was straightforward and simple, and he did things decisively. If he thought of something, he would do it immediately. He had always been like that. At that moment the sky was still dark. Several silver snake-like Tianlei appeared one after another in the thick clouds. The pressure was overwhelming. Everyone had just heaved a sigh of relief because they had escaped a calamity. But when they saw this scene, they all became worried again. Why is there no end to this Tianlei? Someone asked anxiously. If this continues, I'm afraid we'll be finished sooner or later. There was more than one person who was so worried. After all, they had never seen such a scene before. This golden-haired youth could help them for a while, but he could not help them forever. If they could not leave this place, then the final outcome might be the same. Little Boat gently exhaled, and a bright light flashed across his eyes. That voice just now, he heard it. That was a compliment. He knew. He originally wanted to turn back, but in the end he endured it. Although they did not say anything, he knew that this was not a good time to acknowledge each other. For some unknown reason, she did not make a move. Even Rongxiu, who was beside her, was deliberately suppressing his strength. Under such circumstances, naturally, he was the most suitable one to step forward. Little Boat was extremely smart, especially when it came to matters related to her. He always had extremely sharp senses and reaction. Therefore, he held the cloud sky copper sword in his hand tightly and looked up. Boom! Boom! When the Tianlei slashed down continuously, he flew out with his sword. He faced it head-on. Buzz! A sword chime resounded through heaven and earth. Immediately after, the Tianlei seemed to have been summoned by some kind of power, and they all changed their direction and headed toward the cloud sky copper sword. Hongyan and Rongxiu were dumbfounded. Everyone on the mountain was shocked. Chu Luiyue blinked. So the cloud sky copper sword that she had refined back then was so powerful? But it was clearly not even a king divine artifact. That cloud sky copper sword has your aura. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly and suddenly spoke. She touched her chin. Could it be? Was it really because she had forcefully captured those Tianlei back, then to refine the cloud sky copper sword, that this sword still posed a certain threat to those Tianlei until now? This explanation seemed to make sense. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Those Tianlei are not afraid of that sword, but you. Digression. Tianlei meow meow meow? I'll be back at 6. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2009. Just as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. The cloud sky copper sword had already devoured all the Tianlei. As Xiaozhou's sword slashed down, the energy poured out like a torrent. However, the power of the heavenly lightning that was originally aimed at them had all turned into sword chi, and was heading towards the collapsed half of the cliff. The mountain rocks turned into dust, and the space was torn apart crazily. The wind howled, and for a moment the clouds and thunder moved. Even the boundary outside the mountain started to shake violently. It was about to break. Xiaozhou's sword also dealt a heavy blow to Hongyan's heart. Looking at the half of the cliff that was almost completely destroyed, Hongyan's body stiffened, and he almost couldn't believe his eyes. He had never thought that a rank 9 warrior could actually unleash such strength. He asked himself, and even he himself might not be able to withstand the Tianlei. What the hell? This was really what the hell? Thinking about it carefully, this youth was not right from the start of the trial. Hongyan was filled with regret. If he knew that this youth could cause so much trouble, he would definitely not have let him in. But now that things had turned out like this, how should he clean up? Hongin? Hongin? The person beside him shouted a few times. What are you still standing there for? Quickly go and report to master. This anxious voice finally made Hongin come back to his senses. Immediately, his face turned ghastly pale. He was all too clear that if this scene was seen by master, what kind of terrifying punishment would he face? One must know that there was a Xian formation that they had painstakingly set up on the mountain peak. Now it was all destroyed. Now that things had turned out like this, it couldn't be concealed no matter what. Hongin took a deep breath and reluctantly responded. Got it. You stay here and stabilize them first. I'll be back soon. However, before he could do anything, a figure had already flown over from afar. What's going on? The cold and solemn old voice was filled with majesty. The person who came was a black-robed old man, with a head full of silver hair and wrinkles. One of his eyes was deeply sunken in, and his entire body emitted a cold and powerful pressure. When Hongin and Xiaozhou saw the person who came, they were shocked and hurriedly said, Greetings to Hall Master Domin. Domin ignored them. She walked past them and came to the front of the mountain. She quickly took in the scene in front of her. When he saw half of the collapsed mountain, his face turned even colder. Hongin, is this what you've done? His voice sounded exceptionally hoarse and cold. First, you brought them back in advance, and then you allowed them to do such a thing. Hongin, how many lives do you have to pay for the losses you've caused this time? Hongin's legs went soft, and he shuddered, almost kneeling down directly. Hall Master Domin, this. He didn't even know how to explain it. Domin glanced at him coldly. The opportunity to become a gatekeeper is extremely rare. Do you know how much effort this old man put in to leave this spot for you this time? And this is how you repay me? Hongyan's face was as pale as a ghost. Not bad. The reason why he could get this opportunity this time was because of Domin. He had never seen Domin speak to him in such a tone. Facing Domin's question, Hongyan couldn't say a word. What could he say? The whole thing seemed very strange from the beginning. Even that heavenly mountain and this powerful golden-haired youth. But even if he said these things, who would believe or care? Everyone only cared about the results. Trash, Domin sneered. He was extremely disappointed with Hongyan. He was really blind before to have taken a fancy to such a thing. He was hoping that he could use this opportunity to temper his divine body. But he didn't expect that it would cause so much trouble. Domin retracted his gaze. The most important thing now was to deal with the mess in front of him. Master is resting. No one is to disturb him. It would be best if this matter was resolved before Master wakes up. Otherwise, even he couldn't escape this calamity. Hongyan's back was already drenched in cold sweat. He could only nod when he heard this. Domin took a step forward and raised his right hand. Then, a powerful aura transformed into a huge silver ball and flew out instantly. When the silver ball came into contact with the boundary outside the mountain, it immediately let out a buzzing sound. Then, the silver ball quickly dissipated and turned into countless streams of light, scattering in all directions and quickly merging into the boundary. The boundary that was originally on the verge of collapse stabilized with the support of this force. At such a young age, you have some ability. Domin looked at the golden-haired youth standing on the mountain peak. Chang Wanzhou looked up, and a cold light flickered in his eyes. Domin frowned. The aura of this youth made him feel a trace of threat. He was just a rank 9 warrior. Domin felt an inexplicable anger in his heart. His face was dark as he crossed his hands in front of him. Several streams of light gushed out in an instant. Almost at the same time, a strange sound suddenly came from under half of the collapsed mountain peak. Chu Luiyue looked over there, and his eyes narrowed. Under the pile of rocks, streams of light flew out and intertwined with each other. Half a Xian formation was slowly emerging. At the same time, the mountain under their feet suddenly shook violently. Crack! A gully suddenly spread out from under their feet. Chu Luiyue lowered his eyes and his heart sank. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu grabbed her waist, and with a tap of his foot, he soared into the sky. In the next moment, countless cracks crazily spread out like a spider web, covering half of the mountain peak completely. Since you like to split mountains so much, then I'll use this entire mountain to be buried with you. This way, it's not a wasted trip. Do-min's voice that was filled with threat and killing intent sounded like thunder in everyone's ears. He was a venerable god expert, and when he spoke he deliberately increased the pressure. To the young cultivators on the mountain peak, it was undoubtedly a heavy blow. Immediately, there were people who couldn't withstand the pressure and fell to the ground, even vomiting blood. At this time, the Xian formation that was originally buried under the mountain finally revealed its original appearance, floating in midair and enveloping everyone. Although the Xian formation was slightly damaged due to Chang Wanzhou's attack, it was quickly repaired after Do-min took action. This Xian formation was like a cage, trapping everyone in this place. The entire mountain was suddenly in a mess. Everyone was filled with despair. This person's strength was even more powerful than Hongyan. Even if everyone here joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for him. Xylan cried softly. She was afraid and regretful. We're all going to die here today. If she knew that this was hell on earth, she wouldn't have come even if she was beaten to death. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Be quiet. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2010. Although her voice was soft, it carried an unquestionable pressure. Xylan immediately stopped talking. Her eyes were red as she sobbed and looked at her. Because of what happened before, she no longer dared to be presumptuous in front of Chu Luiyue. So when she heard this, she subconsciously held it in. Iziji patted her back gently. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu didn't seem to be as panicked and fearful as the others, his uneasy heart gradually calmed down. These two people seemed to have an inexplicable power that made people feel at ease. He couldn't tell what was going on, but he felt that following them seemed to. Things weren't that bad. But, in this situation, what should he do to escape? The Xian formation began to descend slowly. Every time it got closer, the terrifying pressure and unbridled power above made everyone tremble in fear. Probably realizing that relying on Tianlei's attack wouldn't be able to finish them off easily, Do-min directly used his killing move. Chang Wanzhou raised his head slightly and stared at the approaching Xian formation. There seemed to be endless waves surging in his eyes. This aura. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly, tapped his toes, and went straight for the Xian formation. Boom! The power of both sides collided fiercely. Following this shocking explosion, the unbridled power was like a torrent that surged in all directions. The remaining mountain peak, that had already been split into pieces, finally collapsed completely. For a moment light flashed. Chang Wanzhou's figure was instantly engulfed by this light. Do-min's lips curled into a cold smile. That eye that was still intact flickered with a cold and bloodthirsty light. You don't know what's good for you. Hongyan and Rongxiu, who were standing behind him, heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this scene. Hongyan hurriedly said, "You're a venerable god expert. How can a mere rank 9 warrior be your opponent? With just one move you can." Before he could finish his sentence, his expression suddenly changed. The other person also instantly realized something, and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. How can this be? He's actually not dead. Crack. The sound of something shattering could be heard clearly. This time, even Do-min's expression changed. Impossible. A crack had actually appeared on the huge Xian formation. Voila! Before they could react, the profound formation had actually shattered into pieces. Countless streams of light with astonishing power scattered in all directions. The enchantment outside the mountain instantly shattered. Down below, everyone's expression changed, and they all retreated. A figure flew out from within. He fell heavily onto the ruins. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. Smoke and dust rose in all directions. Chang Wanzhou's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. He was standing closest to the Xian formation, so he received the greatest impact. This time, he was almost half dead. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. He was about to make a move, but was stopped by Rongxiu. Wait. Chu Luiyue was anxious. He couldn't just watch as Xiaozhou was beaten to death, right? Just as she was about to say something, she noticed that Rong Xiu was frowning and looking in a certain direction. Her heart skipped a beat, and she followed his gaze. In the distance, a powerful and unparalleled pressure suddenly descended. Her heart seemed to be clenched tightly by something. This aura, so noisy. A hoarse and low voice seemed to have passed through a long time and space, and came from afar. The voice was calm and casual, but it carried supreme majesty. Mo Shiqian. He was actually here. Digression, Kawenjong 7 o'clock. Sorry for the kissing. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2011. So far, Chu Luiyue had never really seen Mo Shiqian. Although they had confronted each other several times, Mo Shiqian had never shown his face. Chu Luiyue even heard his name from Rong Xiu. However, the moment she heard this voice, Chu Luiyue knew. It must be him. Chu Luiyue held her breath, her heart beating violently, and blood seemed to flow under her eardrums. Previously, she had already guessed that this was the territory of the Black Demon Cave. But she never thought that Mo Shiqian would be here too. In that case, wasn't this the headquarters of the Black Demon Cave? So they were hiding here. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows, revealing a look of realization. No wonder he had sent people to investigate before. But there had been no results. Mo Shiqian was really capable. He had directly left the Divine Ruins world and came here. What a good idea. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue instantly understood Rong Xiu's meaning and frowned slightly. So that was it. A few years ago, the Black Demon Cave suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if they had disappeared from the Divine Ruins world. Who knew? They were actually hiding outside the Divine Ruins world. In this world, who would have thought that they would make such a choice? Moreover, although they were outside the Divine Ruins world, this place was close to the Gate Realm, and the energy of heaven and earth was abundant. It was extremely suitable for cultivation, no different from the Divine Ruins world. If she had not come here today, who knew when she would have realized this? Understanding this, Chu Luiyue's mind raced. She knew very well that Mo Shiqian wanted to snatch her zither score. Previously, she had always thought that the Black Demon Cave had chosen to retreat because Rong Xiu had personally come and severely injured them. They had made this decision in order to avoid the sharp edge and recuperate. But now, she vaguely felt that this guess seemed to be somewhat wrong. Greetings, Sect Master. On the other side, when Hongyan and the others heard this voice, their expressions changed, and they hurriedly bowed. Suddenly the world fell silent. All the noise seemed to have dissipated at this moment. The berserk energy that had been wreaking havoc everywhere stopped flowing. The vast space seemed to be frozen in place. Chu Luiyue could only hear the sound of his heart beating violently. Mo Shiqian's strength had obviously become more unfathomable. Finally, a cloud of black mist condensed in the air. A tall and straight figure stood there, faintly discernible like a ghost. Chu Luiyue held his breath. That person, it must be Mo Shiqian. However, in that instant just now, she actually didn't see clearly how he had appeared. In all directions the void was calm, as if it had frozen. The moment his figure appeared, the surrounding heaven and earth energy and space did not fluctuate at all. There was still a considerable distance between them. However, Chu Luiyue still felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. This person's strength could only be described as terrifying. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue felt an extremely dangerous gaze fall on him. Her hair immediately stood on end. It had been a long time since she felt like she was walking between life and death. At this moment, a warm and broad palm slowly grasped her hand. The warmth of the iron kept coming from above. A faint cold fragrance assaulted her, almost surrounding her. Rong Xiu, he was still here. She looked up. The two of them looked at each other. Rong Xiu smiled slightly and gave her a reassuring look. Chu Luiyue's heart instantly calmed down. No matter what danger she encountered or what situation she was in, he would always be by her side to protect her. Chu Luiyue blinked gently. That gaze finally moved away from her. Emo Shurtian frowned slightly. Could it be that moment just now was an illusion? Putting those thoughts away, he looked up again and gazed ahead. I haven't been out for a while. I didn't expect you to give me such a big gift. He spoke slowly, his voice calm and emotionless. However, in the ears of Hong En and the rest, these words were no different from a life and death warning. Do-min took a deep breath and said, "It's all because of our incompetence to disturb Sect Master. Please punish us." In the end, the worst situation had occurred. But at this time, there was no other way. Life and death were all in the hands of Master. Emo Shurtian ignored him and only raised his hand. Of course, when he did this, his hand was still wrapped in a layer of black fog. No one could see anything clearly. Then, Chang Wanzhou's body was pulled up by this shocking force. At this moment, a few of his ribs were broken, and he had suffered some internal injuries. His entire body was covered in blood and dust, and he looked extremely miserable. He was on the verge of death, and looked like he was about to die at any moment. However, he still held the Cloud Sky Copper sword tightly in his hand. Rank 9 warrior? Emo Shurtian's voice suddenly carried a hint of a smile. Do-min, you're getting more and more promising. Do-min's face was pale. As a god after attacking, his move was actually broken by a rank 9 warrior. If word got out, even he himself would feel embarrassed. He wanted to defend himself, but when he thought about how this person hated these things the most, he gave up in the end. He just stood there trembling in fear, waiting for the final result. Chang Wanzhou's body seemed to be supported by an invisible force as he floated quietly in the air. Emo Shurtian looked at him carefully. Your talent is not bad. Suddenly his voice paused. He seemed to have discovered something as his fingers moved slightly. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou finally opened his eyes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2012. His eyes were filled with wariness. His entire body was tense, as if he was prepared to attack at any moment. However, such actions and threats were not worth mentioning in Emo Shurtian's eyes. He would not take a rank 9 warrior seriously, even if this young man forcefully withstood Do-min's attack. It was just a small matter in Emo Shurtian's eyes. He raised his wrist gently. A strong force assaulted him. Chang Wanzhou's elbow went numb, and he involuntarily let go. The Cloud Sky Copper sword flew forward. Chang Wanzhou's expression immediately turned stern. You. Just as he opened his mouth, he felt as if an invisible hand was strangling his neck. His voice stopped abruptly, and his originally pale face quickly flushed red. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Furthermore, he was injured and could not fight against the other party at all. Hence, he could only watch as the Cloud Sky Copper sword landed in Emo Shurtian's hands. Everyone was silent. The world was so cold and solemn that it seemed to have been completely frozen. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Emo Shurtian. Shock, reverence, fear, all sorts of emotions filled everyone's hearts. That terrifying oppressive might made it, so that they couldn't even speak a single word. Seeing Emo Shurtian's actions, Chu Luiyue slowly clenched his fists. This aura is very familiar. Emo Shurtian weighed the Cloud Sky Copper sword. After looking at it repeatedly, he confirmed his guess. He looked up at Chang Wanzhou again. You're her man. This was not a question but a statement. He did not say who this she was. However, the meaning of his words could not be more obvious. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips tightly and did not say anything. However, Emo Shurtian clearly did not need his answer. He would definitely not be wrong about this person's aura. Interesting. Indeed, like master, like servant. Emo Shurtian laughed, but there was no smile in his words. Chu Luiyue was not afraid of death, and so was this young man. He actually barged in here. Who let him in? Emo Shurtian suddenly asked. Hong En's legs turned to jelly, and he looked at Do-min for help. At this time, he would only have a chance of survival if Do-min spoke up for him. However, at this moment, Do-min suddenly turned around and looked at him with furrowed brows. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear the sect leader's question? Hong En was stunned, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Do-min had already turned around and bowed. Replying to sect master, Hong, and is fully in charge of this trial. Hong An's mind went blank. Do Min continued to speak with a pained and regretful expression. Back then, it was this subordinate's fault for choosing him. I didn't expect him to do such a thing. He deserved to be killed. This subordinate did not investigate properly. It is also a dereliction of duty. Sect leader, please punish me. His words sounded like he was asking for forgiveness, but in fact, he was pushing all the blame to Hong An. Do Min knew very well that he would definitely not be able to escape safely this time with such a big commotion. But at the very least, he had to protect his own life. As for Hong An at this time, he could not even protect himself. How could he care about him? Hong An did not expect that Do Min, who had always favored him, would not leave him any leeway at this critical moment. He even pushed him behind his back. Did he think that he would not die quickly enough? For a moment, Hong An was also enraged. He immediately said, Sect leader, please investigate. This subordinate is really wronged in this matter. This subordinate. You did very well. Mo Shirqian was impatient to listen to their excuses, so he interrupted Hong An. Although he had been resting earlier, he was aware of everything that had happened. He was also very clear about what they were planning in their hearts. Now, he did not have the time to deal with this. Hong An was stunned. The two people beside him were also shocked. What did the sect leader say just now? He said he did very well? Hong An almost thought that he was hallucinating. He looked up in disbelief and glanced at Mo Shirqian. However, with just a glance, he sensed a warning and hurriedly lowered his head. It's a felony to bring them back in advance. However, this time it's considered a crime. Mo Shirqian's meaning was very clear. It was because of this golden-haired youth that he did not intend to pursue Hong An's mistake. Hong An was shocked and confused, but more than that, he was happy to have survived a disaster. According to the sect leader, he would not die. In fact, he might not even be punished. And all this was because he brought back the golden-haired youth? Do Min was embarrassed. Mo Shirqian's words were undoubtedly like a slap to his face. But what was the background of that golden-haired youth that the sect leader valued him so much? They were not the only ones. At this moment, almost everyone had the same question in their hearts. This golden-haired youth's talent and strength were not bad, but it did not seem to be to an exaggerated extent. Moreover, he had tried to fight Mo Shirqian just now. Such a person usually only had a dead end. What did he have that Mo Shirqian valued? Could it be that sword? Mo Shirqian put away the sword and sized up Chang Wanzhou again. Although this cloud sky copper sword was not a top-grade divine artifact, it was obvious that a lot of effort had been put into it. Chu Luiyue was willing to give this sword to him. It could be seen that this golden-haired youth had a close relationship with her. She can be said to be in the limelight now. Mo Shirqian muttered thoughtfully and chuckled. If she knows that you are in my hands, I wonder how she will react. She would not be in a good mood. Chang Wanzhou stared at the figure in front of him. Due to the black fog, he could not see the other party's appearance clearly. He could only see the rough outline of the figure. He knew that the other party was extremely strong. He had not felt such a dangerous aura for a long time. Mo Shirqian asked, "What's your name?" Chang Wanzhou did not speak. Mo Shirqian smiled. "Do you think I can't do anything to you like this?" This golden-haired youth's appearance was extremely eye-catching. It was not difficult to find out his identity after asking around. Mo Shirqian's gaze landed on the crowd below. That sharp and cold gaze was like a blade that cut across their bodies. Some people's legs went weak, and they could barely stand. Whoever can tell me this person's name and background, I will reward you handsomely, Mo Shirqian said. Everyone was dead silent. No one answered. Not to mention that they did not know. Even if they did, they could not say it out loud. Chang Wanzhou had just saved their lives. Mo Shirqian's expression darkened as he smiled faintly. Oh, you don't want to say it? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2013. Dead silence. The atmosphere became even colder. Mo Shirqian moved his fingertips. A young man flew up. What's his name? Mo Shirqian asked. The young man's face was pale as he shook his head in panic. I don't know, bang. As soon as he finished speaking, there was an explosion. It was the young man's body that suddenly exploded. Without any warning. It was extremely violent. He didn't even have time to beg for mercy or cry out in pain before he died. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. It was a shocking sight. This sudden scene caused everyone's hearts to tremble violently. Many people's expressions changed. Chu Luihua also frowned. She knew that Emo Shirqian had always been ruthless. But she didn't expect him to be so. Ah! A scream was heard. He Xylan was suddenly caught by Emo Shirqian. What's his name? Emo Shirqian continued to ask. Obviously, he was just randomly picking someone to ask. If she answered that she didn't know or didn't say anything, she would probably die. He Xylan's face was as pale as a ghost. When had she ever encountered such a scene? Thinking of the miserable death of the young man just now, she was so scared that her teeth were chattering. Who was that golden-haired young man? What was his background? She really didn't know. Ziji's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his face was filled with despair. This time he was afraid. Chang Wanzhou. At this moment, a clear and calm voice suddenly came from behind the crowd. Everyone looked over, but they were all stunned. The person who spoke was an ordinary-looking young woman. At this moment, she was looking up at the sky. He's from the Tianling dynasty. Ziji opened his mouth and looked at Chu Luihua in disbelief. She knew. She actually knew. Then what was her identity? Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, causing Ziji to fall into deep confusion. The next moment Xylan's body suddenly flew backward. Ziji hurried forward and barely caught her. The powerful impact made Ziji fall heavily to the ground. The sound of bones breaking was heard. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Xylan's situation wasn't any better. Both of them were in a sorry state. But even so, he still managed to keep his life. Some people looked at Chu Luihua with undisguised anger. Obviously, in their eyes, Chu Luihua had betrayed Chang Wanzhou by taking the initiative to answer. However, Chu Luihua turned a blind eye to these gazes. She had her own plans. Emo Shirqian turned his gaze to Chu Luihua. Chu Luihua lowered his eyes slightly. Come here, Emo Shirqian said. Chu Luihua walked forward. The others stared at her. Although they had different thoughts, they were afraid of Emo Shirqian and did not dare to say anything at this moment. Rongxiu did not follow. In this almost suffocating atmosphere, Chu Luihua walked to the front of the crowd. I said come here. Emo Shirqian's hoarse and deep voice sounded like a death knell. Chu Luihua seemed to hesitate for a moment before finally moving forward. In the end, she walked up to Emo Shirqian step by step. There were only 10 steps between the two of them. Beside her was Chang Wanzhou. Chang Wanzhou turned his head and glanced at her indifferently. That gaze was extremely unfamiliar. It was cold and heavy, and it even carried a trace of extremely faint anger. He didn't seem to understand why this person had exposed his identity. Chu Luihua didn't seem to notice his gaze, and bowed to Emo Shirqian. Emo Shirqian asked, Do you know him? Chu Luihua lowered her eyes. Yes. Emo Shirqian was a little interested. Someone from the Tianling dynasty. No wonder. Wasn't that person from the Tianling dynasty? He sized up Chang Wanzhou again. I know that she has the 13 Yu guards by her side, and recently, she brought a few of them to the Divine Ruins world. All of them are doing well and are famous. I remember that there's no one like you among the 13 Yu guards, right? Previously, he had spent a lot of effort investigating Chu Luihua, and was quite familiar with the 13 Yu guards. He didn't have any impression of the name Chang Wanzhou. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips tightly, still uncooperative. Emo Shirqian didn't care, and turned to look at Chu Luihua. You said you know him then. Who are you? Chang Wanzhou's identity was not simple. Those who knew his name and background should not be ordinary people. Emo Shirqian's scrutinizing gaze enveloped Chu Luihua. She smiled slightly. Because of this smile, that ordinary face suddenly had a different kind of elegance. A pair of black jade-like eyes were filled with fine starlight. Emo Shirqian suddenly felt that something was wrong. At this moment, a ball of reddish gold flames suddenly burst out from her body. A shocking and terrifying pressure spread crazily towards the surroundings. Under the flames, a beautiful and thin soft armor quickly covered her entire body. Swoosh! A snow-white longsword pierced through the air. A clear shout suddenly spread far and wide between the heavens and the earth. Who am I? Mo Shirqian, you should know best. Before she finished speaking, Chu Liyue's figure had already disappeared from the spot. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone only saw a piercing sword light wrapped in reddish gold flames cross the sky and charge straight at Mo Shirqian. Mo Shirqian roared in shock and anger. Shangguanyu! Shangguanyu! Hearing this name, everyone present was shocked. Wasn't that the princess of the Tianling dynasty? The rumored one who had already entered the Divine Ruins world? Why did she suddenly appear here? Iziji and Hezilan looked at each other and saw the deep shock in each other's eyes. So that woman was Shangguanyu? That man Swoosh? Before they could figure it out, Rongxiu's figure had disappeared without a trace. The next moment, he suddenly appeared behind Mo Shirqian. His thin scarlet lips curled up slightly as if he was smiling, but there was a hint of coldness at the corners of his eyes. Mo Shirqian, how have you been? As early as when Chu Liyue started to make a move, Mo Shirqian had already expected that Rongxiu would be here too. He was about to turn around when an extremely cold aura came towards him. Mo Shirqian's heart sank. Previously, he already knew what happened at Peach Blossom Dock. He also knew that Yi Wentao had been defeated by Chu Liyue. But at that time, he had thought that Chu Liyue had used some tricks to finally win that bet. But now, facing Chu Liyue's attack, he suddenly realized this woman's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. Almost at the same time, Chang Wanzhou suddenly moved. A shocking aura erupted from his body. Mo Shirqian was even more shocked and furious. Exalted goddess. He had not noticed it at all before. In the blink of an eye, the three of them had surrounded Mo Shirqian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2014. Moreover, one of them was a venerable god, and the other two were exalted gods. Under normal circumstances, even if three venerable gods fought him at the same time, he would definitely win. However, among the three of them, apart from Chang Wanzhou, one was Chu Liyue and the other was Rongxiu. These two people were not easy to deal with. In a flash, Chu Liyue's sword aura had already landed. Mo Shirqian could not dodge, and could only choose to fight head-on. With a flick of his wrist, the black mist around him quickly condensed into a long saber. The long saber was solid and suffused with a dark light. There was a faint scarlet color on it, as if it was outlining some kind of pattern. Clang! The two of them fought in close combat. Swish! The sharp sound of weapons scraping could be heard. Flames splattered everywhere. The powerful force made Chu Liyue's hand go numb. She focused her eyes and saw that the pattern on Mo Shirqian's long saber was the totem of the Black Demon Cave. I was thinking of what method to use to lure you out of Peach Blossom Dock. I didn't expect you to come by yourself. Mo Shirqian smiled coldly and swung his saber. When he moved, the surrounding space quickly distorted. Chu Liyue did not want to fight. When Mo Shirqian's long saber was about to swing over, she used the force to retreat. Swish! A black spatial crack tore open in front of Chu Liyue. Her eyes were cold, and the reddish-gold flames quickly turned into a huge reddish-gold phoenix. Chu Liyue leaped onto Dumpling's back. Whoosh! Dumpling flapped her wings and flew up. Chu Liyue's mind raced. She had just wanted to test Mo Shirqian's strength. He was a venerable god, and he had reached the absolute peak. Chu Liyue had fought with Yi Wentao before. In the Divine Ruins world, Yi Wentao was already publicly recognized as one of the best among the supreme gods. And Mo Shirqian in front of him was much stronger than him. With her own strength, she was definitely not a match for him. She had used 80% of her strength in that attack, but she hadn't hurt Mo Shirqian at all. That day, she was able to beat Yi Wentao because she had the advantage of time, place and people. But today was different. This was Mo Shirqian's territory. Just as Mo Shirqian was about to chase after her, a cold wind suddenly came from behind. He knew something was wrong, and immediately turned around. An extremely thin golden thread quickly flew over, and wrapped around the long saber in his hand. Clang! Rong Xiu pulled his wrist, and the golden thread immediately tightened. Mo Shurqian knew Rong Xiu's strength. Seeing this, he let go of his hand without hesitation, and threw the long saber out. Bang! A violent explosion was heard. It was Rong Xiu's finger pressing on the golden thread, and he suddenly moved it. The golden thread trembled, and the long saber connected to it was instantly reduced to dust by a terrifying force. The battle in the sky erupted fiercely. The onlookers were all shocked on the spot. At this moment, Domin's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that the people over there had already started fighting, he immediately shouted sternly, "Everyone listen up! Attack immediately, and take down these 3 people." With that, he took the lead and rushed over. Although the sect leader was powerful, he couldn't justify being besieged in his own territory. However, before he arrived, Rong Xiu waved his sleeve. Boom! The golden flames were like a torrent, gushing out endlessly, forming a huge golden barrier in the sky, encircling the few of them. Domin was immediately isolated. The golden flames were resplendent and tightly blocked everyone's vision. Domin crossed his hands in front of him. A Xian formation quickly gathered in front of him. Roar! A deep tiger's roar instantly reverberated through the air. However, before he could make a move, a clear phoenix cry came from within the barrier. Bang! The powerful bloodline pressure from the ancient divine beast immediately suppressed the tiger roar above the Xian formation. The illusion that was forming also shattered with a loud bang. When Domin heard the phoenix cry, he knew that something was wrong. However, before he could retreat, the Xian formation had already collapsed in front of him. His face paled, and the thick smell of blood instantly surged up his throat. Crimson gold heavenly phoenix! Hong'an exclaimed in shock. Even though they were outside, and couldn't see what was going on inside, they still saw it clearly when the crimson gold heavenly phoenix appeared. Iziji and the others standing below didn't know what happened in the Divine Ruins world. It was normal for them to be shocked when they saw this scene. However, these things they knew. Domin was also filled with regret. He only wanted to atone for his mistake by meritorious service. But he forgot that Chu Luiyue wasn't easy to deal with. The one she contracted was not only a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, but it was also the young master of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan. She could defeat Yi Wentao, so her strength naturally couldn't be underestimated. The scorching hot temperature came from the barrier, causing Domin to be even more frightened. He tried a few more times, but he realized that it was difficult to even get close to the barrier, let alone open it. At this moment, people rushed over one after another and surrounded the huge barrier. However, they were completely helpless against the spirit formation. What should we do? Someone asked. Domin's brows were tightly knitted. Everyone be on guard. Seal all the barriers. Don't allow anyone to enter or leave. Once they come out, immediately attack. He originally thought of everyone joining forces to forcefully break the barrier from the outside. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that this method wouldn't work at all. After all, the sect master was still inside. If they were slightly careless, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Now they could only hope that the sect master could come out first. Hall Master Domin, what about those people? Hong'an turned around to take a look, and some impatience appeared on his face. Lock them all up first. At this time, who still had the mood to think about these people? Yes, in the Black Demon Cave, other than Mo Shurqian, who was the sect master, the ones with the most authority were the few hall masters. When the incident happened, Domin happened to be present, so everyone subconsciously respected him. Although there were some problems before, compared to the current situation, it was not worth mentioning. Almost no one cared. Therefore, under Domin's command, the entire Black Demon Cave quickly became alert. Everyone used the space formed by the huge golden barrier as the center, layer by layer, and waited. Hall Master Domin, the sect master is fighting 1 against 3. Will he be fine? Everyone was still a little worried about this. especially since Rong Xiu is also here. The person who spoke lowered his voice. Domin's expression was also a little solemn. Others were fine, but Rong Xiu, he was a real killing god. A few years ago, countless people in the Black Demon Cave had died at his hands. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2015. Things are different now. The sect master's strength has increased greatly. They can't hurt him easily. Domin hesitated for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Moreover, don't forget where we are. This is the territory of the Black Demon Cave. How can anyone be so presumptuous? The reason why they suffered a huge loss at Rong Xiu's hands a few years ago was that the sect master was in seclusion at that time and couldn't take any action. On the other hand, they were caught off guard and weren't prepared. But it was different now. The sect master could fight, and they had the relevant experience. This time, that kind of thing would not happen again. Hearing his words, everyone nodded and looked at the golden boundary. They began a long and torturous wait. Inside the boundary, Mo Shurqian glanced at the long saber that had turned into powder in an instant. His eyes were cold. Rong Xiu's strength was obviously stronger than before. You guys have hidden yourselves well. I have really underestimated you guys. Mo Shurqian's voice was filled with anger. He had felt that something was wrong before, but he did not think too much about it, because he did not expect that the two of them would really come here directly. For the past few years, he and the entire Black Demon Cave had been hiding here, and had never been exposed. He knew that Rong Xiu had used many methods to investigate, but they were all in vain. Who knew? Mo Shurqian suddenly thought of something and his heart sank. You broke through the Peach Blossom Docks Gate realm. Other than this, he could not think of any other possibility. Chu Luiwe narrowed his eyes. There was indeed something wrong with the Gate realm, and it had something to do with Mo Shurqian. Peach Blossom Dock is already mine. Mo Shurqian, what's the point of asking these questions? Chu Luiwe said slowly. On the day your Black Sword sect was completely annihilated, you should have expected this day to come. Mo Shurqian sneered. After occupying Peach Blossom Dock and defeating Yi Wentao, you are indeed more confident in your words. After those things happened, he was indeed quite shocked. But he was busy at that time, so he put these things aside for the time being. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, they would actually kill their way here? You dare to come here directly? You sure have guts. That's what you said the last time I charged into the Black Demon Cave. Rong Xiu suddenly opened his mouth. His tone was lazy and his expression was undisciplined. Mo Shurqian, you can change your line. You. Mo Shurqian was furious. However, he could not refute Rong Xiu's words. Last time, he had indeed suffered a great loss at the hands of Rong Xiu. Suddenly, a figure came closer. Chu Luiwe turned his gaze to Chang Wanzhou. At this moment, the injuries on his body were almost completely healed. He looked dispirited and listless before, but in the blink of an eye, he seemed to have become a completely different person. He was already a high god. Even Chu Luiwe was surprised by this. Outside the Divine Ruins world, wanting to break through this layer of shackles was not easy. She asked softly, Little Zhou, when did you break through to high god? Chang Wanzhou looked at her. His exquisite and beautiful face was still stained with blood. A moment of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Swish. The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came. Chu Luiwe suddenly looked up, and his pupils constricted. The black mist on Mo Shurqian's body suddenly began to surge rapidly. A cold and bloody aura kept spreading. Then two more figures appeared behind Mo Shurqian. There were two people who looked exactly like him. Thousand Shadows' divine body. Digression. Khan. Sort out the outline and adjust the update time. Starting at noon tomorrow. The update will start at 5 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2016. The Thousand Shadows' Divine Body. was a legendary and extremely powerful divine body cultivation method. It was rumored that this divine body had been lost for a long time. Even Chu Luiyue, who had read countless related materials in Lingxiao College, had only vaguely heard of this name. As for the specific method of cultivation, she did not know. She did not expect to encounter it here today. Looking at the three identical figures, Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed slightly. The Thousand Shadows divine body was powerful, because the cultivator could refine more than one divine body. As one's own strength increased, the number of divine bodies one could possess would also increase. It was undoubtedly a great advantage when fighting with others. More importantly, the divine bodies that were cultivated possessed the same strength as the cultivator himself. In other words, the current situation was equivalent to three Mo Shurtians fighting against the three of them. The advantage of 3 against 1 was instantly disintegrated. When the three Mo Shurtians stood on the spot at the same time, the thick layer of black fog also divided into 3 parts and surrounded each of them. The black fog seemed to have thinned a little, but Mo Shurtian's face could not be seen clearly. However, even so, Chu Luiyue could still feel the cold and sinister eyes staring at her. "It's good that you're here. I want to see how powerful Peach Blossom Doc's Lord Yu is now." As Mo Shurtian spoke, he dashed towards Chu Luiyue. However, as soon as he moved, a golden thread instantly flew toward him. Mo Shurtian's eyes sharpened, and he immediately dodged. In just a moment, Rong Xiu had already appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. His snow-white robe fluttered in the wind. There seemed to be a smile on his incomparably noble face, but his deep and cold eyes were filled with bone-chilling coldness. "Mo Shurtian, your opponent is me." With that, Rong Xiu raised his hand and golden flames gushed out from his palm. Although the two divine bodies that appeared had the same strength as Mo Shurtian, only by killing the real Mo Shurtian could it be considered a complete end. Mo Shurtian gritted his teeth. Originally, he wanted to make a move on Chu Luiyue. However, with Rong Xiu's protection, there was no way he could do anything for the time being, unless he could get rid of Rong Xiu first. Good. Since that's the case, let's settle the old and new scores together. As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Shurtian's aura soared again. Whoosh! He waved his arm, and a black and red scythe appeared in his hand. Chu Luiyue recognized at a glance that this was not the long saber from before. It was condensed from the strange black fog around him. This was a real divine artifact. Furthermore, the pressure on it was extremely strong. Suddenly, a white light flashed in Chu Luiyue's mind. This was not a venerable artifact. This was a real, sacred artifact. 9 Nether Scythe. Mo Shurtian raised the sickle in his hand. In an instant, a cold and gloomy killing intent quickly spread out from within. A thin layer of blood-red frost quickly covered it. Whoosh! The sickle fell, and a sea of blood surged. Rong Xiu waved his sleeve, and the golden flame flew out quickly. Boom! 2 strong and bright colors instantly collided in midair and exploded. On the other side, Mo Shurtian's divine bodies also began to move separately. One went straight to Chong Wanzhou, while the other jumped from the side and came behind Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue quickly turned around. She frowned slightly, and then put away the red cloud sword. Standing opposite her, Mo Shurtian frowned, and then seemed to show a strange smile. His laughter was hoarse and low. "It seems that you're quite prepared." Even his voice and tone were no different from the real Mo Shurtian. Chu Luiyue raised her vigilance to the highest. From a certain perspective, this was equivalent to fighting with Mo Shurtian. Mo Shurtian's strength was obviously above Yuan Tao's. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to defeat him. However, Chu Luiyue did not expect to win this battle. What she needed to do now was to stall for time. Whoosh! The flowing cloud flying diagram flew out of her hand. The red scroll was unfolded, and Chu Luiyue's fair and slender hand quickly skimmed over it. Soon, several Xian formations appeared in front of her one after another. Seeing this scene, a trace of surprise finally flashed across Mo Shurtian's eyes. He knew that Nan Yifan had died in Peach Blossom Dock not long ago, and that the flowing cloud flying diagram had fallen into Chu Luiyue's hands and become her possession. However, before Chu Luyue became the owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram. The flowing cloud flying diagram had never displayed its true combat power in the past 1,000 years. Therefore, it was the first time Mo Shurqian had seen such a scene. The flowing cloud flying diagram. You're using it well. It was obviously impossible to say that he was unperturbed. Back then he had the chance to obtain this thing. Unfortunately, like the rest of the world, he thought that the flowing cloud flying diagram was only a sacred artifact for escaping. So he didn't take it to heart. Now that he thought about it, however, Mo Shurqian also understood that artifacts of this level actually had spiritual energy. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted for such a long time before displaying its true power in Chu Luyue's hands. A cold smile appeared on Chu Luyue's lips. You flatter me. With that, with a thought, the Xian formations quickly flew forward and surrounded Mo Shurqian. On the other side, Chang Wanzhou had already started fighting with Mo Shurqian's Thousand Shadows divine body. To be fair, an exalted god like Chang Wanzhou was definitely no match for Mo Shurqian. Even Chang Wanzhou himself admitted this. Therefore, from the moment the two of them started fighting, Chang Wanzhou had already decided not to fight Mo Shurqian head-on. When the scene was in chaos earlier, Mo Shurqian had casually thrown the Cloud Sky Copper sword out, and he had quickly snatched it back. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou was holding the Cloud Sky Copper sword, and only chose to attack from the side. Although he was not as strong as Mo Shurqian, he was agile. Every time Mo Shurqian planned to kill him, Chang Wanzhou would escape first. The two of them fell into an anxious battle. Time ticked by second. The golden barrier was extremely tight, so much so that no one outside could see what was happening inside. Not even a sound could be heard. Gradually, the people who were waiting started to feel restless and uneasy. I wonder what's going on inside. Sect Master is at a disadvantage fighting the three of them. That might not be the case. Sect Master has just come out of seclusion, and his strength has increased greatly. He might not lose to them. That's right. Besides, don't forget that Sect Master cultivates the Thousand Shadows divine body. Even if the three of them join forces, they might not be able to gain any advantage from Sect Master. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2017. At the mention of this, everyone's restless hearts finally calmed down. Ever since they suffered a great loss at the hands of Rong Xiu a few years ago, the entire Black Demon Cave had been recuperating. The sect leader had been cultivating in seclusion all year round, and his strength had greatly increased. Now that they were facing each other again, it was still unknown who would win. Family E. The remote and quiet courtyard was deserted and cheerless. Only one elder stood in front of the door, guarding it out of boredom. Ever since Yi Wentao returned, he had been staying in this room, and had never come out. The other members of the family E had not come either. Of course, except for Jun Jiuqing, who was now the family head. However, he had only come once. The entire family, E seemed to have forgotten that Yi Wentao was here. No one came here, and it was very quiet. No one would have thought that Yi Wentao, who had dominated the family E for hundreds of years, would end up like this. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking came from inside. The elder on guard frowned, and went forward to ask, "What's wrong, family head?" After many years of habit, he still called Yi Wentao family head. However, they all understood that this word was meaningless to the current Yi Wentao. "It's fine. I hit the corner of the table and broke a cup." After a moment, Yi Wentao's somewhat suppressed and cold voice was heard. The elder on guard nodded in understanding. Please be careful. He had no intention of going in to clean up. He was the only one in charge of guarding the entire courtyard. If nothing important happened, he would not leave his position at will. Besides, breaking a cup was indeed a small matter. After saying that, he looked away. Inside the room, Yi Wentao sat on a chair. On the ground in front of him was the table that he had just kicked over. The tea stains were scattered all over the floor, and the teacup was broken. Beside him, a man in black knelt. Yi Wentao's chest rose and fell violently, and his eyes seemed to be burning with anger. It was obvious how angry he was at this moment. Can't contact him? What is the meaning of this? He lowered his voice, but it was not difficult to hear the strong anger in his words. The black-clothed man still kept his head down. We've already sent 3 messages in a row, but there's still no reply from the other side. Yuantao took a deep breath and closed his eyes. In fact, he had long understood the meaning of these words. He just didn't want to believe it. Was the Black Demon Cave planning to ignore him? Yuantao tried his best to calm the surging emotions in his heart, but it was very difficult. The Black Demon Cave was his last hope. A few days ago, Jun Jiuqing came over and asked him the same question. At that time, he seemed to have compromised and told him everything about the armillary shield, but in fact he hated Jun Jiuqing to the core. From his point of view, Jun Jiuqing had the ambition of a wolf. He had long planned to take over the position of the family head. While he was trapped in the Peach Blossom Cove, he forcefully took action and easily became the new head of the family. Now Jun Jiuqing was high and mighty, but what about him? He had been reduced to such a state that he could not even freely enter and leave this courtyard. Yes, Jun Jiuqing was the successor that he had personally selected, but at that time, how could he have known that Jun Jiuqing was such a person? He could only blame himself for being blinded. He had actually been fooled. To think that he had personally handed the token to Jun Jiuqing. Thinking about it now, it was extremely ironic. Of course, Yuantao was not going to sit still and wait for death. Therefore, after a few years of hibernation, he finally contacted his loyalists again. Of course, he had his ways. The black-clothed man in front of him was one of them. What Jun Jiuqing wanted was actually very simple. He wanted to regain everything that he had lost, to restore his strength and retake the family. However, it was easier said than done. No matter which of these two things, to the current him, it was almost impossible for him to accomplish them. Therefore, from the beginning, he wanted to rely on external forces. This external force was naturally the Black Demon Cave. In the past few years, in order to avoid Rong Xiu's investigation, he had been very careful and had cut off contact with his loyalists. Until this time, there was really no other way. Moreover, he had already fallen out with Rong Xiu. Even if he knew about this, there was nothing to be afraid of. Now that he had nothing, what was there to be afraid of? But he did not expect that his desperate gamble of summoning loyalists and asking them to contact the Black Demon Cave would result in such a result. Obviously, without the help of that person, he would never be able to turn the tables. That was why Yuantao was so flustered and exasperated. When Rong Xiu attacked the Black Demon Cave, if I had not sent several loyalists to help, how could they have had time to leave so smoothly? Now they have turned against me. As he spoke, Yuantao coughed again. His face was still very pale, and there was a bloody and sweet taste in his mouth. Seeing this, the black-clothed man kneeling below asked worriedly, "Master, your body?" Yuantao shook his head. "I'm already recovering. I'll be fine after a while." His voice still sounded a little weak. The previous battle had exhausted him too much. The few days when he was locked up in Peach Blossom Dock were even more devastating. If not for his good foundation, he would not have been able to hold on. Contact him again. The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment. "Master, could it be that something has happened on the other side as well?" Yuantao frowned. "What?" "I personally think that even if the other side does not want to help, they would at least let me know and would not be so unresponsive. Also, that person should know about the current situation of Family E and the Nan family, but until now, they have not done anything. Don't you think it's strange?" Yuantao did not think so at first, but after hearing what he said, he instantly felt that something was wrong. He stood up and paced around the room, frowning and thinking for a long time. That's right. Both the Nan family and Family E were in trouble. That person would definitely not be indifferent. After all, he was the one standing behind these two families. Now, he and Nan Yifan had been defeated. To a certain extent, it was also a humiliation to that person. How could he tolerate it? Perhaps that person is still in seclusion? In the past few years, Iwentao had rarely contacted that person. He only knew that he spent most of his time in seclusion cultivating. No, if that's the case, the people below would not be indifferent. Iwentao suddenly stood still and opened his eyes wide. I'm afraid that something has really happened in Black Demon Cave. He turned his mind and looked at the black-clothed man. Have you been noticed by anyone recently when you came? The black-clothed man immediately said, No, I've always been cautious and did not dare to make the slightest mistake. Iwentao was still worried. He paused and asked again, What's the situation at Peach Blossom Dock in Yuntian Tower? The black-clothed man shook his head. It seems that everything is normal. I haven't heard any news recently. Iwentao's heart suddenly sank. Something has happened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2018. At this moment, familiar footsteps came from outside. Iwentao was shocked. The elder in charge of guarding the door had already spoken. Greetings, master. Junjiuqing. Why is he here all of a sudden? Iwentao frowned and immediately turned around to give the man in black a look. The figure of the black-clothed person flashed and disappeared on the spot. Junjiuqing's voice was as casual as ever. I haven't been here for a few days and missed you. I thought I'd drop by to take a look. At this moment, he had already walked to the door and looked inside. How's the situation? The elder hurriedly said. Everything is normal. It's just that master seems to be in a bad mood today. Junjiuqing smiled. Is that so? All the more reason to go in and take a look. With that, he pushed the door open and entered. The room was very quiet, and there was a faint bitter medicinal fragrance. Although Junjiuqing hadn't been here for a few days, he had always sent people to deliver medicine. He walked in and saw Iwentao and the mess on the floor. Junjiuqing raised his eyebrows. You're really angry. What's wrong? Are the servants not serving you well enough? Iwentao sneered in his heart. Serve? During this period, he had been locked up here like a prisoner. How could anyone serve him? It was more like surveillance. Iwentao looked up and asked coldly, What are you doing here today? I've already told you everything that needs to be said the other day. His face was full of annoyance, and he was just short of chasing him away. Junjiuqing didn't care and smiled faintly. Nothing. I heard that you had a guest, so I thought I'd come to take a look. Iwentao's heart thumped hard. However, he was an old fox after all. He didn't show any guilt on his face. Instead, he laughed sarcastically. What did you say? Guest? I don't have anyone here other than you. Guest, where did you come from? Junjiuqing looked around. The air in the room seemed to have frozen. Patriarch, why do you have to do this? After a long while, Junjiuqing finally spoke. Thanks to your grace, I was able to become the young lord and ascend to the position of patriarch. If you continue to stay here like this, I guarantee that you will be able to spend the rest of your days in peace. Unfortunately, you don't seem to care about this. Iwentao said coldly, I don't know what you're talking about. For the past few days, I've been wondering how you managed to get in touch with that person. Junjiuqing suddenly interrupted his words, and there was a strange smile on his devilishly handsome face. Although Family Yi's family business is big, you're dealing with them as an individual. The rest of the family knew nothing about this. Under such circumstances, what did you use to persuade the other party to join hands with you? Iwentao's throat went dry as he stared at Junjiuqing. What are you trying to say? Junjiuqing smiled and shook his head. You should know best what I'm trying to say. For the past few days, I've been thinking about it day and night, and I finally remembered something. He took a step forward. Iwentao didn't know why, but his legs suddenly went weak, and he unconsciously took a step back. The two confronted each other. Junjiuqing's aura easily crushed Iwentao. Iwentao secretly regretted it. This retreat was a sign of guilt. Junjiuqing continued. I remember that a few years ago, when Rong Xiu went to the Black Demon Cave, that person was at a critical juncture of his cultivation and had almost no combat power. With Rong Xiu's temperament, if he could completely kill the other party, he would definitely not leave the slightest chance of survival. But that time, the Black Demon Cave actually escaped and found another place to go. This meant that although Rong Xiao caused serious damage to the Black Demon Cave that time, he did not really threaten the other party's foundation. With every word Jun Jiuqing said, Yi Wentao felt more pressure in his heart. Seeing that he was silent, Jun Jiuqing asked softly, "Don't you think someone helped you?" Bang! Yi Wentao took a step back and accidentally knocked over the chair behind him. The high-quality rosewood chair fell to the ground with a dull thud. "Master, what's wrong?" The elder outside the door heard the sound and quickly knocked on the door to inquire. Jun Jiuqing said lightly, "It's nothing. You don't have to come in." Yes. The elder was also a smart person. When he heard this, he immediately responded and obediently continued to guard the door. The room fell into a short period of dead silence. "It seems that what I said was true." Jun Jiuqing laughed. Although it was a question, his tone was very certain. I didn't." Yi Wentao opened his mouth and wanted to deny it, but Jun Jiuqing's words made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. "Don't you find it strange that after so long, no one has come to receive you? Even the news you sent out was not responded to?" Yi Wentao suddenly felt a chill in his heart, causing his whole body to turn cold. You. He widened his eyes and looked at Jun Jiuqing in disbelief. Jun Jiuqing knew. "I heard that those were the talents that you carefully nurtured for several years and spent a lot of time and effort on. What a pity." Yi Wentao's heart was in a perilous situation. Jun Jiuqing suddenly tilted his head and looked at the void behind Yi Wentao. Then, with a flick of his wrist, a vigorous force transformed into a long whip and suddenly flew out. Smack! The void was forcefully cut open, and the man in black, who had just been hiding, was directly pulled out. His neck was tightly bound by the long whip, and he could not break free. Seeing this, Yi Wentao's usual calm facade could no longer be maintained. You knew all along." Jun Jiuqing did not say anything and exerted force. Crack! The crisp sound of bones cracking was heard. Finally, the man in black's neck tilted, and he stopped breathing. He was not weak, but Jun Jiuqing struck first and did not give him any chance to breathe. That was why he died. The man in black lay on the ground, and thick red blood slowly flowed out from under his body. The thick smell of blood quickly spread out. Yi Wentao's lips trembled, and his face was pale. At this point, what was there to not understand? "It's not that I knew all along." Jun Jiuqing looked up and glanced at Yi Wentao. "You can't hide it, so isn't it normal for others to know?" Previously, he only had his suspicions and did not have any evidence. However, he knew that Yi Wentao would definitely not let the matter rest. So during this period of time, he had been sending people to secretly keep an eye on him. Sure enough, he found something. There was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Besides, Jun Jiuqing was already prepared and was waiting for him to walk into the trap. Yi Wentao trembled all over, and there seemed to be a fire burning in his chest, but his body was still cold to the bone. He knew that this time, he was really finished. How do you know so much? About Black Demon Cave, about that person, about everything. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2019. At first, he hadn't noticed, but now he remembered that Jun Jiuqing's words were very strange. Not many people knew that Rong Xiao had gone to the Black Demon Cave. Most people in the entire Divine Ruins world thought that the Black Demon Cave had suddenly chosen to hide from the world and disappeared without a trace. There were very few people who knew what had happened at that time. Not only did Jun Jiuqing know, but he also knew very well. He even knew that the person in the Black Demon Cave was at a critical moment and couldn't make a move. This matter was extremely confidential, and Jun Jiuqing had nothing to do with it. How did he know so much? Yi Wentao really couldn't figure it out. He looked at Jun Jiuqing with a complicated expression. Only now did he realize that he didn't know much about Jun Jiuqing. This person was extremely dangerous. Jun Jiuqing didn't answer his question. He knew a lot of things, so why should he tell Yi Wentao, who was already crippled? "It seems that I really overestimated you." Jun Joching smiled faintly. After so many years, it's really a miracle that Family E hasn't been implicated by you. Don't worry. Family E is definitely several times better in my hands than in yours. In the future, you should continue to rest here quietly. With that, he turned and left. It seemed that he didn't want to say so much to Yi Wentao. Obviously, he came this time to deal with the black-clothed man, and also to cut off Yi Wentao's last path of retreat. Yi Wentao's eyes were bloodshot. Stop right there. He suddenly let out a roar. Jun Joching stopped in his tracks and looked back. Boom! A cluster of green flames suddenly burst out from Yi Wentao's body. Jun Joching's pupils shrank. Yi Wentao was going to self-destruct. He was crazy. Yi Wentao was indeed crazy. The black-clothed man's death, and Jun Joching's words were the last straw that broke the camel's back. He thought that he still had a chance to turn the tables, but now, everything was in vain. He didn't need to think about it to know what kind of life he would live in the future. Like a prisoner extremely lowly, trapped in this place, never seeing the light of day, until he died. Yi Wentao's life was proud and honorable. How could he bear such an ending? Since all hope was gone, he might as well die with Jun Joching. Even though Yi Wentao was crippled now, he was still a top-rate revered god in the past. If he forcibly self-destruct, the consequences. At such a close distance, even if Jun Joching didn't die, he would be crippled. Jun Joching, however, the flames on Yi Wentao's body were spreading too quickly. He had already made up his mind to die, so he didn't hold back at all as he madly urged the origin power in his body to burn. A terrifying aura was rapidly gathering. Jun Joching knew that something was wrong. He made a prompt decision and turned to run. Bang! He directly forced open the door. Master, what's going on? The elder guarding the door was shocked. He was about to ask when he saw a shadow flash before him. Before he could finish, a scorching and terrifying aura suddenly rushed out of the room. A deep sense of fear welled up in his heart, and he subconsciously looked inside. Yi Wentao had become a burning man. The accumulated power in every inch of his body was burning crazily. After all, he used to be a powerful god. The power in his body was extremely shocking. The elder immediately sensed the danger. Yi Wentao was going to self-destruct. Without a second thought, he immediately retreated. At this moment, he didn't have time to think about what had happened inside to make Yi Wentao make such a choice. There was only one thought in his mind: run. However, before he could run too far, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from behind him. A terrifying wave of chi gushed forth like a surging river, engulfing everything. Green flames covered the sky and earth. The elder was hit by this terrifying explosive force. His body flew out and was torn into pieces in midair. Then, he was swallowed by the green flames that were spreading crazily. From life to death, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Although Jun Joching's reaction was extremely fast, and he managed to escape further away, he was still unavoidably affected by this power. His chest shook and he spat out blood. At this moment, his internal organs felt as if they had been crushed by this power and were about to explode. His vision turned black and he fainted. This commotion quickly spread. The entire family finally fell into chaos. Chu Luyue and the others, who were far away in the Divine Ruins world, did not know what happened to the family Yi. However, Mo Shiqian had always been in contact with Yi Wentao. In the midst of the chaotic battle, his expression suddenly froze. He gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "Useless thing." Rongxiu heard this. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and then realized what had happened. His thin lips curled up slightly. It seems that the winner of the family E has been decided. You. Mo Shiqian looked up suddenly. You did it. Rongxiu smiled faintly. There can't be two tigers on one mountain. Do you still need me to do such a thing personally? If he didn't do anything, the family E would turn the world upside down. After all, Yi Wentao and Jun Joching were not easy to deal with. Judging from Mo Shiqian's reaction, Jun Joching should have won. This was the same result he had expected. Mo Shiqian was furious. What he hated the most was Rongxiu's always calm and collected appearance. It was as if nothing in the world could disturb his mind, and no one could gain the slightest advantage from him. No matter what kind of trouble he encountered, he always seemed to be victorious. What right did he have? Emo Shurchian was unconvinced and indignant. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. After the fight just now, his body was already riddled with injuries and bloodstains. However, Rong Xiu was much stronger than him. Although he was also injured and stained with messy blood, most of it was not his own blood. A few years ago, he was at a critical juncture of cultivation, so he could not fight Rong Xiu head-on. He thought that after such a long time, he could finally surpass Rong Xiu. Who knew? Things did not go as he wished. Yes, he was cultivating, but Rong Xiu's strength was also increasing. If this went on, he would be the one to lose in the end. One had to know that Rong Xiu had not summoned his divine body yet. Moreover, he also had 2 divine bodies. On the other hand, the 2 divine bodies that he had painstakingly cultivated were now entangled by Chu Luyue and Chang Wanzhou. Chang Wanzhou seemed to be the weakest, but his endurance was extremely astonishing. It had been so long, but his speed and movement technique had not weakened at all. Needless to say, Chu Luyue was even more so. Just the flowing clouds flying diagram alone was enough to give him a headache. Not to mention, she had the help of Dumpling, who had already opened the 5th meridian. Moreover, she still had a trump card that she had not revealed. This battle was most likely going to be very dangerous. Emo Shurchian thought quickly and made a decision. This could not go on. Blood Heaven Realm. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2020. Following his roar, a copper mirror suddenly appeared in front of him. This bronze mirror was very similar to the one that Hongen had taken out before. But it was also different. The edge of this bronze mirror was engraved with mysterious runes. In the mirror, a sea of blood was surging. A fishy, sweet and dense smell of blood suffused out from within, and it was mixed with the smell of decay, causing one to feel nauseous. Chu Liuyue's expression froze. She had seen this bronze mirror before. The previous few times, Emo Shurchian had not revealed his true appearance, and this bronze mirror had always appeared. At this moment, the Emo Shurchian, in front of her suddenly retreated. On the other side, the divine body that had been fighting with Chang Wanzhou for a long time also retreated without hesitation. The 3 figures gathered and stood in one place. Then, the 2 divine bodies transformed into a cloud of black mist again, and surged into the Blood Heaven realm. Emo Shurchian stood in front of the Blood Heaven realm with his hands crossed, and his eyes closed. Then, a distant and heavy pressure suddenly spread out from the Blood Heaven realm. The void trembled and distorted. Alarm bells rang in Chu Liuyue's mind. She didn't even need to think before she shouted, "Dumpling!" Dumpling reacted extremely quickly. Its huge reddish-gold wings flapped, and immediately rose into the air. Chang Wanzhou's eyes sharpened as he slashed down the cloud sky copper sword. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere, and several silver-white Tianlei forces surged out. In the blink of an eye, a barrier condensed in front of him. A black flame flashed in Rong Xiu's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. His palm moved slightly as if he was about to move, but after a moment of hesitation, he quietly retracted it and only tapped the tip of his foot and retreated. Almost at the same time, boom, a loud sound was heard. In the Blood Heaven realm, a scarlet sea of blood surged violently. As the waves continued to rise and fall, a terrifying power surged out from within. The golden enchantment finally broke apart at this moment. In an instant, countless golden sparks scattered in all directions, almost illuminating half of the sky. "It's out!" When the people who were waiting outside heard this, their spirits were lifted. Countless pairs of eyes looked towards the center. Amidst the flashing lights, the bronze mirror suspended in midair immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone from the Black Demon Cave was overjoyed. Sect leader is indeed powerful. They knew very well that this was the sect leader's trump card. Sure enough, as soon as it was summoned, it tore apart Rong Xiu's barrier. Suddenly, a low voice came from the crowd. "Why is there so much blood on Sect Master's body?" The crowd, which was still boiling with excitement, fell silent for a moment. Just now, when the barrier was broken, they were too excited and didn't notice it. When she heard this, she took a closer look and saw that there was more blood on Emosherchian's body than the other three. Although his body was still shrouded in a layer of black mist, it had become much thinner after a series of fierce battles. Clearly, he had used up a lot of energy just now. The Blood Heavenly Realm is the Sect Master's trump card. Since he's using it now, he'll definitely win. After a moment, someone said loudly, "This was the Black Demon Cave's territory." There was no reason for these three to be so presumptuous. There was a reason for the previous incident, but this time, the same thing would never happen again. Just as everyone was about to besiege, Emosherchian suddenly said, "Everyone from the Black Demon Cave, listen up. Get into formation." No one dared to disobey the order. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Without the protection of Rongxiu's barrier, the three of them were immediately in a dangerous situation. There were so many cultivators from the Black Demon Cave here. If they all attacked together, she was afraid. Thinking of this, she quickly turned her head to take a look. However, what she saw stunned her on the spot. The people from the Black Demon Cave did not go forward to attack. Instead, they spread out. They stood neatly, and all of them did the same action. Their arms were crossed in front of their chests, their fists clenched, and their heads lowered slightly. Chu Liyue frowned. Why did they look more like they were performing some kind of ritual? As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she saw spots of light appear one after another above everyone's heads. The spots of light were only the size of a fist and were not dazzling. They were faint blood red. It looked like a blood moon. Chu Liyue suddenly remembered the totem of the Black Demon Sword sect. 2 swords cupping the moon. Moreover, it was indeed a blood moon. However, for some reason, this scene was inexplicably familiar. "People of the Black Demon Cave, please protect us." Suddenly, Emosherchian opened his mouth and said something in a low voice. He stood in front of the Blood Heaven mirror, facing the blood-red mirror. This voice was filled with admiration and expectation, as if he was summoning something. Chu Liyue had never seen such a situation before, and was puzzled for a moment. Emosherchian was seeking help? He's waiting for someone. Rongxiu's figure moved, and he came to her side as he spoke softly. Chu Liyue glanced at him. Waiting for who? Rongxiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly, and did not answer. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. In fact, the answer was not difficult to guess. At this time, of course Emosherchian was waiting for someone who could help them. However, who could it be? Suddenly, a figure slowly emerged from the sea of blood in the Blood Heaven mirror. Following this, an ancient voice could be heard. "What's the matter?" This voice seemed to come from a distant time and space, carrying an astonishing pressure. As soon as the voice fell, the surrounding space seemed to tremble. Emosherchian bowed and said, "I had no choice but to disturb you. I really didn't want to. However, I'm in trouble this time. Please help me." He raised his hand and pointed at Chu Liyue. "Please kill the 3 people from Shangguanyu." Between heaven and earth there was silence. Chu Liyue suddenly approached Rongxiu and whispered, "Why do I feel this voice is so familiar?" Before she finished speaking, the voice sounded surprised and happy. "Little girl, you are. Users of mobile phones, please browse and read. A better reading experience came from Love Network." Chapter 2021. Chu Liyue was taken aback. This voice. Senior Diwu. She spoke with some uncertainty. The figure in the Blood Heaven realm gradually lost its blood-red color, revealing its original appearance. His face was kind, and he looked like an immortal. It was Diwu Zhangzi, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, those weathered eyes were looking at Chu Liyue with joy and longing. Come and let this old man take a look." Emosherchian, who was originally full of confidence, was shocked. The people who were standing in the array were also stunned. What did he say? What did he just shout? It was obvious who he was shouting at. Even a fool could tell. "As Senior you, Emo Shirchian was so shocked that his heart was trembling. He had spent so much effort to invite this person here to deal with Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue. Why did the situation seem to be developing in an uncontrollable direction now? Diwu Zhangzi frowned impatiently and waved his hand. Hey, Emo Shirchian, right? Get out of the way first. Don't block my Yuer from coming over. As he spoke, he tilted his head and shouted at Chu Luyue with a smile. Girl, come over. Emo Shirchian's body stiffened, and his mind went blank for a moment. For a moment, he almost suspected that he had heard wrongly. But in the blood heaven realm, Diwu Zhangzi's eager and happy smile at Chu Luyue was enough to explain everything. Chu Luyue hesitated for a moment, but still chose to go forward. With Diwu Zhangzi here, no one dared to act rashly. She walked all the way to the front smoothly and bowed respectfully and obediently. You are great, Senior Diwu. Diwu Zhangzi looked at her and sighed. I haven't seen you for a while. Yuer has really become more and more beautiful. The corner of Chu Luyue's mouth twitched. She slowly raised her hand and took off the mask on her face. Senior Diwu, you can say this later. She had that ordinary face of hers, yet he could still praise her like that. Diwu Zhangzi waved his hand. Sai, are you, or has always been the most beautiful girl in the world? Who would dare to question him? His words were filled with arrogance and pride. His words caused many people to look at Chu Luyue. The woman wore an ordinary crimson dress, and her fine black hair fluttered in the wind. The face under the mask was as white as snow, with skin of ice and bones of jade. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her eyes were like autumn waters. In particular, the free and easy feeling between her brows added to her elegance. Many people's eyes flashed with surprise. The legendary Shang Guanyu, the princess of the Tianling dynasty, was like a legend. She was indeed the most beautiful woman in the world. Chu Luyue laughed, his eyes curved into crescents. Don't tease me. Diwu Zhangzi looked at her and suddenly asked. You've cultivated a divine body. Chu Luyue was still wearing that layer of gorgeous soft armor, which shone with a piercingly cold and noble light under the sunlight. She nodded slightly. I just cultivated it not long ago. Diwu Zhangzi was overjoyed. Yuer is indeed amazing. He thought it would take some time, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. Sure enough, this girl's talent and opportunities were far beyond ordinary people's. How have you been? Chu Luyue asked. I wanted to go back and take a look, but I couldn't find the time. I didn't expect to meet you here today. Her lips curved slightly, and she said softly, what a coincidence. There was a moment of dead silence. Diwu Zhangzi touched his nose awkwardly. Emo Shirchian's blood had already coagulated, and his limbs were numb. He spent a lot of effort to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. Senior Diwu, you know Shang Guanyu? This sentence was simply nonsense. Anyone could tell that not only did they know each other, but they also had a close relationship. Otherwise, how could they call each other so intimately? But at this moment, Emo Shirchian almost couldn't think of this. He realized that the external aid he invited might have become the enemy's helper. Diwu Zhangzi looked at Emo Shirchian. The smile on his face faded, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. This was a far cry from the kind and warm attitude he had when facing Chu Luyue just now. That's right. Yuer can be considered half a disciple of mine. What? You invited this old man here today just to kill her? Emo Shirchian was shocked, and his heart sank. Half a disciple. This kind of relationship was indeed incomparable to ordinary people. In his impression, this person had never taken in a disciple before. How could Chu Luyue? Emo Shirchian's heart was in a mess. Inviting a master to kill his disciple. What a joke! Chu Luyue blinked. Half a master. Actually, this was a little exaggerated. When she was in the Red Moon Desert, she spent most of her time with Dabao. And the things she learned there, such as various prescriptions and Xian formations, were basically all learned from Dabao. But at this time, this kind of explanation was obviously more convincing. Diwu Zhangzi secretly glanced at Chu Luyue. Seeing that her eyes were bright, and she had no intention of refuting, he was immediately in a good mood. Taking advantage of Dabao's absence, it was great to be Yuer's master for a period of time. Emo Shirchian opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. Master and disciple. It's a long story. Diwu Zhangze had already looked at Chu Luyue and said helplessly and guiltily, "In the early years, I had some dealings with the sect master of the Black Demon Cave, but that's all in the past." If this girl knew that he had received many offerings from the Black Demon Cave back then, he was afraid. "Anyway, I have no direct relationship with them now. The reason why I came today is that there is a trace of my aura in the Blood Heaven realm. This is also left behind from back then." Diwu Zhangze rubbed his temples in annoyance. In fact, he indeed didn't have any dealings with the Black Demon Cave. It was just that the relationship wasn't completely severed back then, which gave Emo Shirqian a chance. If he had known the situation here would be like this, he wouldn't have come no matter what. He was almost misunderstood by you, or Diwu Zhangze felt wronged. He had been trapped in the Red Moon Desert for so long. What else could he do? Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Diwu Zhangze's attitude couldn't be more obvious when he sided with Chu Luyue, even if he was invited by Emo Shirqian. At this time, he was obviously still on Chu Luyue's side. How could they fight? Emo Shirqian clenched his fists, and the waves in his heart couldn't calm down for a long time. He never thought that things would develop like this in the end. Diwu Zhangze was actually Chu Luyue's backer. Why hadn't he heard of it before? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2022. Diwu Zhangze was a powerful backer that the Black Demon Cave's ancestral sect leader had latched onto thousands of years ago. For a period of time, Diwu Zhangze did indeed have a good relationship with the Black Demon Cave. Of course, this good referred to the fact that he felt that the things sent by the Black Demon Cave were good and to his liking. But in all honesty, ever since he was trapped in the Red Moon Desert, he had never received any benefits from them. Diwu Zhangze felt wronged, but how could Emo Shirqian not have mixed feelings? This Blood Heaven realm was passed down by the Black Demon Cave's sect leaders. It was a symbol of status, and also a great trump card. From the day he became the sect leader, he knew that the aura of a powerful being was sealed inside. As long as he joined forces with the people of the Black Demon Cave, he could summon him. But such an opportunity only came once. So over the years, the sect leader of the Black Demon Cave cherished this opportunity very much, and did not dare to use it easily. Only when the entire Black Demon Cave was in a life-and-death crisis could they use this trump card. If Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao hadn't appeared together today, and Emo Shirqian still didn't have the momentum to win after a long battle, he wouldn't have chosen to invite this person over. Emo Shirqian's idea was very simple. Seize the opportunity to eliminate these people once and for all. This way, it wouldn't be a waste of this one and only great opportunity. But who knew that things would turn out like this? Even if the Black Demon Cave could barely establish a relationship with this person, how could it compare to their master-disciple relationship? Everyone in the Black Demon Cave looked at Emo Shirqian in shock and helplessness. Emo Shirqian clenched his fists, and the flames in his chest seemed to be about to burst. "I see," Chu Luyue said with a smile. "In that case, there really was a misunderstanding. Senior, you don't know. When I didn't know it was you just now, I really thought I was going to die here today." "Bah! What do you mean die? Don't talk nonsense." Although he knew that she was joking, Diwu Zhangze couldn't bear to hear her say such things. After all, he knew that this girl had really died once. And at that time, she didn't even have any memories. She had forgotten all about them. Thinking of that time, Diwu Zhangze's heart ached. Wait a minute. That time? Was it because the Black Demon Cave attacked her? Diwu Zhangze looked at Emo Shirqian slowly. A chill instantly enveloped Emo Shirqian. His heart skipped a beat. Among other things, his intuition was very accurate in this regard. Diwu Zhangze was looking at him like, "Oh, that's right. Little Yuer. Was he the one who attacked you a few years ago?" Diwu Zhangze asked slowly. Chu Luyue blinked. "You still remember? Speaking of which, it was a long time ago." "I remember. At that time, Sect Master Emo seemed to want to snatch something from me." She paused, and the smile on her lips deepened. "A few years have passed, but Sect Master Mo is still very persistent about this matter. Not long ago, the family E and the Nan family joined forces and headed to Peach Blossom Dock to surround and intercept us. What nonsense are you talking about? Mo Shurqian shouted, the veins on his forehead bulging. Although Chu Luyue was telling the truth, how could he admit it in front of Diwu Zhangze at this time? Wasn't this purely attracting hatred? Diwu Zhangze was already very unhappy that he invited him over to kill her. If he knew that he had used so many methods previously, Diwu Zhangze would probably want to kill him. How is it nonsense? Chu Luyue looked surprised. Didn't Sect Master Mo help transfer Nan Yi's Yuan Meridian to her brother? It's also because of this that Nan Yifan blamed Nan Yi's death on me, and hates me to the core. And family Yi. Why do you think they suddenly had the idea of snatching Peach Blossom Dock? Moreover, they acted together with the Nan family. This is too much of a coincidence. What do you think? Chu Liyue's words were very clear and logical. Even those who didn't know much about these matters could sense that something was amiss when they heard this. Obviously, someone was secretly instigating and sowing discord. And who this person was, it was even more obvious. Mo Shurqian clenched his fists tightly and looked at Chu Luyue, as if he wanted to tear him apart. Family E? Nan family? Little girl. They must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to dare to make a move on you. A trace of shock flashed across Diwu Zhangze's face, and he instinctively glanced at Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao moved and walked forward with a faint smile. Driven by benefits, those people are naturally capable of doing anything. At this time, he had also removed the disguise on his face. There was a faint smile on his handsome and devilish face. Even if he was dressed in extremely simple and ordinary clothes, it couldn't hide his peerless beauty. When the two of them stood together, the surrounding scenery immediately paled in comparison. Even if they didn't do anything, it would always make people involuntarily look over. His features were picturesque, and his charm was unparalleled. That's the princess's husband? The legendary, holy son of the Yintian Tower? Ziji looked at this scene in a daze, and muttered in a low voice. Although they hadn't been to the Divine Ruins world, rumors about these two people had already spread among many cultivators in the past few months. In fact, this news was first spread by the people of the Black Demon Cave. The main purpose of doing this was to attract those genius cultivators to Cloud State City to participate in their trial. They didn't expect that Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao would actually appear here directly. When they thought of how they had interacted with these two for so long, and even owed them a favor, Ziji and his sister couldn't help but look at each other and see the shock and disbelief in each other's eyes. No wonder she's so strong, Xilan subconsciously said in a low voice. To think that they were talking about the princess in front of those two, but they didn't expect that the real princess was right in front of them. Seeing that Diwu Zhangze was still angry, Chu Luyue smiled and comforted him. However, Senior Diwu, you don't have to worry too much. Those troubles have been resolved. Nan Yifan is already dead. As for Yi Wentao, he's also dead. If I'm not wrong, it should have happened just now. Rong Xiao added. Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows slightly and glanced at him. Since Rong Xiao said so, it should be close to the truth. It seemed that Yi Wentao's life after returning wasn't easy. He even died in such a short time. Jun Jiuqing still had some tricks up his sleeve. Chu Luyue thought to himself. To be able to ascend to the position of family Yi's head with a different surname was not simple. Now that Yi Wentao was dead, the entire family Yi was in his hands. Hearing this, Diwu Zhangze finally calmed down a little. These days, any dog dared to touch their Yu. Did they really think that they couldn't support you, or just because they were trapped in the Red Moon Desert? His gaze was cold as he asked word by word. Mo Shurqian, what do you want to steal from you? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2023. This question was low, cold, and oppressive. Every word was like a mountain that weighed heavily on Mo Shurqian's heart. What did he want? Of course, it was the thing in Chu Liyue's body. But he couldn't say this out loud. The scene fell into a stalemate and was deathly silent. The air seemed to have solidified. Everyone held their breaths and waited. At this moment, even breathing seemed wrong. It's all a misunderstanding. Finally, Empress spoke slowly. Every word seemed to be spat out through gritted teeth. Previously, Shurqian didn't know that Shengguan Yu had such a relationship with you. I hope Senior can forgive me for offending you. He lowered his head and compromised. The people from Black Demon Cave were shocked at first, then they looked dejected and desperate. Even the sect master said so. That made sense. They had spent so much effort to invite foreign aid. But in the end, they were supporting the other party. Then how could this match go on? There was probably nothing more embarrassing than this. Misunderstanding? I don't think so. Diwu Zhangzi interrupted him and sneered. Just now, this old man heard it clearly. You wanted to kill you and the others. Although this old man is old, I haven't reached the stage of being blind and deaf. Even if it's really a misunderstanding, can I make a mistake a few years ago, and make another mistake now? Shurqian closed his eyes, and took a deep breath to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. It's a long story. I can't explain it to you in a short time. I have a lot of time. If you have anything to say, just say it. If I can resolve the misunderstanding between you two, I'll have done a good deed, right? Diwu Zhangzi laughed. But in Shurqian's ears, this laugh was undoubtedly the greatest mockery. He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. There was really no way to clean up this situation now. Explain? There was no explanation at all. He was the one who did those things. How could he explain it clearly? Shurqian never thought that Chu Luiyue had such a backer. He lowered his head slightly, and didn't say a word. Seeing his reaction, what else could Diwu Zhangzi doubt? Shurqian knew. Before she could finish her sentence, Shurqian suddenly moved. He turned his fist into a palm, and slammed it toward the blood heaven mirror in front of him. Since the person he invited wasn't a helper, then, there was no need for him to be so respectful. The thick black mist instantly shrouded the blood heaven realm. Diwu Zhangzi shouted angrily. Shurqian, how dare you? He wanted to destroy the blood heaven realm. It contained Diwu Zhangzi's aura. If the blood heaven realm was destroyed, Diwu Zhangzi would also be affected. Moreover, without the blood heaven mirror, he couldn't do anything. Since Senior doesn't intend to help, then don't blame us for being impolite. Before he finished his words, Shurqian had already slapped the center of the blood heaven realm. Sect leader. When Do Min and the others saw this, they were all shocked and cried out in surprise. They all knew that blood heaven realm was closely related to Shurqian. Most of his cultivation relied on this item. If he was injured, he could only recover quickly by relying on the blood heaven realm. Once the blood heaven realm was destroyed, he would also be greatly affected. But now that things had come to this, he had no other choice. Crack. A crisp cracking sound was heard. A crack quickly spread on the blood heaven realm. Puff. Almost at the same time as the blood heaven realm shattered, Shurqian's body shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The aura around his body also instantly became dispirited. But he didn't stop attacking. As long as the blood heaven realm was destroyed, the only way for Diwu Zhangzi to come would be cut off. If he didn't come, Shurqian and the entire Black Demon Cave might still have a chance to survive. Sensing Shurqian's thoughts, Diwu Zhangzi snorted coldly, and blood energy filled the air. A terrifying pressure suddenly surged out from it. Shurqian's heart sank. Before he could react, he was blown away by the violent air wave. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were standing not far away, and were about to be affected. However, just as the power was about to engulf them, a figure suddenly broke out of the blood heaven realm. Boom! The blood heaven realm completely shattered. However, that figure stood in front of them, and easily blocked the violent energy that was sweeping towards them. Everyone turned to look at that figure. It was Diwu Zhangzi, but at this time his figure was a translucent phantom. And this was the aura he had stored in the blood heaven realm. Shurqian looked at the scene in front of him in shock and disbelief. How could this be? When the blood heaven realm shattered, your aura should also dissipate. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone present understood what he meant. Diwu Zhangzi first turned around, and carefully looked at Chu Luiyue. You are I came out in a hurry just now. Did I hurt you? He asked with concern and nervousness. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I'm fine. Not to mention that with her current strength, she could perfectly avoid the attack. Even if it was too late, there was still Rongxiu in him. The two of them stood in front of her and protected her tightly. It would be strange if she was still injured. Diwu Zhangze was relieved after making sure that she wasn't affected. That's good, that's good. On the one hand, he felt sorry for Yuer. On the other hand, if De Bao and Lan Xiao found out that he didn't protect Yuer well, TSK. Diwu Zhangze didn't know if he could still survive in the Red Moon Desert. He let out a long sigh of relief and looked at Emo Shiqian. Emo Shiqian met those old and cold eyes, and his heart suddenly trembled. You're right. Without the Blood Heaven realm, I can't come over. Diwu Zhangze stroked his beard. But who told you that my aura would be annihilated if the Blood Heaven realm shattered? Emo Shiqian opened his mouth, but didn't make a sound. He thought so because this was tacitly agreed by the Black Demon Cave sect masters, who knew that after the Blood Heaven realm shattered, not only did the aura not dissipate, but it even appeared. Suddenly, Diwu Zhangze patted his head. Oh, I remember now. This should be what Emo Yao said back then. Emo Yao was the first sect master of the Black Demon Cave, and the forger of the Blood Heaven realm. He told you that you can summon me with the Blood Heaven realm. And if you destroy it, you can also cut off my way of life, right? Diwu Zhangze looked at him sympathetically. Silly child, I lied to him back then. Why did you all believe it? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2024. Emo Shiqian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Even when he knew that Diwu Zhangze was Chu Liyue's half-master, he had never been so desperate. Fake. All of this was fake. This was the highest-level secret of the Black Demon Cave, which had been passed down for thousands of years. All the previous sect masters had believed in it and kept it strictly, but it turned out that it had been a complete lie from the beginning. Emo Shiqian's blood and chi surged, and his aura showed signs of rebellion. The strong smell of blood between his lips and teeth kept surging, almost suffocating him. His mind buzzed and seemed to be blank. Even everything in front of him seemed to be distorted and became illusory. Diwu Zhangze's voice kept coming into his ears. To me, the Blood Heavenly Realm is nothing more than a place for this remnant aura to reside. Even if it's gone, I can still stay in another place. However, I remember that this Blood Heaven realm seems to be very important to you, right? Especially since you're the sect master. If I'm not wrong, more than half of your force will be consumed when the Blood Heaven realm is broken, right? Diwu Zhangze shook his head with emotion. So miserable, so miserable. Years of hard work and cultivation were ruined just like that. Those who heard it were sad, and those who heard it shed tears. Emo Shiqian spat out another mouthful of blood. After the Blood Heaven realm was broken, the black mist that had been lingering around him gradually dissipated. His face was finally revealed in front of everyone. Chu Liyue looked over, and surprise flashed across her eyes. Emo Shiqian looked very young, only in his 20s. His appearance was delicate, and even a little feminine. His skin was very white, and if one looked carefully, one could even see the faint blue blood vessels under his thin skin. It was as if he had never seen the sun all year round. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to accept that the famous sect master of the Black Demon Cave had such a look. Did he rely on cultivation to maintain this appearance? Chu Liyue asked in a low voice. It was said that Emo Shiqian had been the sect master for decades. His true age was obviously not the 20-something years old that he appeared to be. Rongxiu nodded. Diwu Zhangze chuckled. Girl, there's something you don't know. The cultivation method of the Black Demon Cave is different from that of other sects and clans. They devour the essence and force of other cultivators to improve their own strength. It's extremely insidious. Moreover, the younger and more talented, the richer and purer the power they can extract. Emo Shiqian is now at the peak of the God realm. To reach this step, his hands are stained with the blood of countless cultivators. This was also why he had lied to Emo Yao back then. From the very beginning, He knew that this black demon cave was not a good place. But at that time he didn't care. Who would have thought that today, they would actually stretch their hands towards you? This Diwu Zhangzis. Chu Luiyue was shocked when she heard this, but she instantly understood something. No wonder. The Black Demon sect had to. As the AS cultivators, however, after they gathered these people, they did not spend much effort in nurturing them. Instead, they killed them in batches. It turned out, it was all because of this. Below, Iziji and the rest also turned pale when they heard this. He had originally thought that after participating in this trial, he would be able to enter the Divine Ruins world and achieve meteoric success, becoming a top expert. In the end, they were just here to die. If not for Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao, they would have. Everyone was scared. Looking at the surroundings, the mountains were undulating and lush. Who would have guessed that this was a hellish place? Relying on such methods to forcibly improve one's cultivation is against the heavens. It's a grave sin. In the end, it will only backfire on oneself. Diwu Zhangzi stared at Mo Shiqian, his eyes cold. Originally, this old man didn't want to meddle in your affairs after all these years of self-cultivation. But you delivered yourselves to me. Don't blame this old man for being rude. With that, he suddenly raised his hand. An invisible pressure quickly spread out in all directions. Condense. Following his shout, Chu Luiyue suddenly realized that the surrounding space was quickly solidifying. After the blood heaven mirror shattered, it disintegrated into countless fragments and scattered in all directions. Along the way, it carried several violent forces that almost tore the void apart and caused the world to tremble. However, after Diwu Zhangzi shouted, all the movements suddenly stopped. The fluttering leaves suddenly stopped in the air. The collapsed cliffs and rocks no longer rolled down. The air was filled with a faint smell of blood and a trace of icy cold air. A crease suddenly appeared in midair. Chu Luiyue widened his eyes in shock. That was a fold caused by forcibly twisting space. Then a second, a third. This world seemed to be under Diwu Zhangzi's control. With a wave of his wrist, he caused the endless void to twist and fold. He didn't summon the divine realm, but he was the only master here. Break. Diwu Zhangzi spat out a word between his lips. The wrinkles quickly gathered around Mo Shiqian and surrounded him. Then there was a loud bang. Boom. The huge space directly exploded. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 2025. There were no tricks, no hesitation. From the beginning to the end, Diwu Zhangzi only made one move and said two words. And these two words easily determined Mo Shiqian's life and death. When the compressed space exploded, Mo Shiqian's figure was instantly swallowed. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted, and she could hardly believe what she was seeing. Actually, this was the first time she had seen Diwu Zhangzi make a move with her own eyes. Back in the Red Moon Desert, although she had fought with Diwu Zhangzi and the others, their goal at that time was to improve her strength, so they knew how to hold back. She only knew that they were all very powerful, but she didn't know the upper limit of their strength. She had never seen them truly fight to the death with anyone. Furthermore, this was only Diwu Zhangzi's aura. Then, how strong was his true strength? Moreover, Diwu Zhangzi wasn't the strongest among the three of them. Chu Luiyue still remembered that Lan Xiao had once said in disdain, Diwu? He just knows how to play with space. He doesn't have much ability. It was precisely because of this sentence that Chu Luiyue had sent Mu Hongyu to the Red Moon Desert and let her cultivate with Diwu Zhangzi. Lan Xiao's words were still ringing in her ears. Looking at the scene in front of her, Chu Luiyue was speechless. If this was just playing with space and not much ability, then how could the rest of the people in this world live? A miserable cry of agony could be heard coming from within. Even though the space there was chaotic and all kinds of black spatial rifts intertwined, and outsiders couldn't see anything at all, it wasn't difficult to imagine what kind of terrifying torture Mo Shiqian had experienced when they heard this sound. Many people from the Black Demon Cave were frightened out of their wits. Some even wanted to retreat. This person was simply too terrifying. The sect master's strength could be considered the top in the entire Black Demon Cave. Even he couldn't gain any advantage from the other party, let alone them? The world was silent, and Emo Shurtian's voice sounded especially mournful. It was chilling. However, this voice didn't last long. As time passed, the sound gradually weakened until it completely disappeared. Sect Master, how is it? Someone asked cautiously and fearfully. No one answered. He didn't need to guess to know that it wouldn't be any better. Hong'an looked at the space that was crazily strangling and shuddered. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and planned to leave quietly. This place was too dangerous, especially when those 3 people were brought in by him. No matter what, he had to escape as soon as possible. However, just as he took a step forward, a strange voice sounded from the front. He was shocked and looked up, only to see a spatial fold surging toward him like a wave. Danger! Hong'an knew that something was wrong. He moved his feet and was about to retreat quickly. But at this moment, how could he still be in control? The space around him suddenly froze, making him unable to move. He could only watch as the fold approached. No! Hong'an's eyes widened in horror. The next moment he felt a chill at his waist. The voice in his throat also stopped abruptly. He slowly looked down, only to see that the lower part of his body was gone. He was swallowed and strangled by the spatial fold. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Only then did the intense pain come flooding in from all directions. Hong'an's eyes rolled back and he fainted. But soon, his upper body was also erased by the spatial fold that kept coming back and forth. In the blink of an eye, he was gone. This scene made everyone more and more silent. It also made those who were ready to make a move extremely frightened, and dispelled those unnecessary thoughts. Diwu Zhangzi didn't even look over. He only stroked his beard and said calmly, "Did I say you could leave?" He rarely made a move, but when he did, it had to be perfect. He hated disobedient people the most. "If I tell you to stay here, then stay here. Why are you moving around? You almost destroyed the spatial pattern that I had painstakingly conceived." If everyone knew what he was thinking at this moment, they would probably vomit blood again. It turned out that the lives of these people were not as important as that spatial fold in his eyes. Chu Luyue exhaled softly. Diwu Zhangzi was already so powerful. Then what about Lan Xiao? And what about Dabao? Moreover, Dabao seemed to be rather fearful of the Divine Ruins world, and had been unwilling to make a move there. Even now, she was still very puzzled about this matter. Poof! At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Luyue put away her chaotic thoughts and looked up. In the chaotic space that was already distorted beyond recognition, a fist-sized black fog suddenly broke out from it. And within that black fog was an extremely familiar aura. That was Emo Shurtian's soul. Chu Luyue's heart tightened. Diwu Zhangzi had already made a move again. Sacrificing your life to protect your soul. You're smart. However, if you think you can escape like this, you're too naive. As soon as he finished speaking, several spatial folds appeared in the surroundings again, and surrounded that black fog. However, at this moment, a series of explosions sounded one after another. It was the blood moon-like balls of light above the Black Demon Cave people's heads that exploded one after another. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2026. Balls of blood-colored light exploded, instantly tearing the surrounding space apart. These forces seemed to be guided by something and intertwined with each other, forcibly carving out a bloody path. And the black fog that carried Emo Shurtian's soul fled along that path. It was extremely fast. Diwu Zhangzi sneered. "Want to run? Not so easy." He waved his hands, and the surrounding space began to squeeze toward the center again. Emo Shurtian's path forward was sealed again. Bang! The black fog crashed forward fiercely, but it could not break through the space barrier in front of it. Diwu Zhangzi had already sealed this place. How could he escape? Even when he was at his peak, he might not be able to do so, let alone now. The Blood Heaven realm was already destroyed, and Emo Shurtian was done for. His current actions were just the desperate struggle of a cornered beast. A transparent cage suddenly appeared in Diwu Zhangzi's palm. The cage was only the size of a palm, and it shone faintly under the sunlight. Chu Luihua focused on it, and his gaze suddenly focused. The glittering dots of light on the surface were actually runes. Exquisite technique, go! Diwu Zhangzi let out a clear shout, and the small transparent cage quickly flew out. It silently drew a straight silver line in the air, and went straight for the black fog. There was no way to avoid it. Just as the black fog was about to be locked up by the transparent cage, an explosion suddenly came from their side. Chu Luihua immediately looked back and frowned. It was a subordinate of the Black Demon Cave. His body suddenly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist. He didn't even have the chance to cry out in pain before he lost his life. Then, the cloud of blood mist actually flew toward the black fog. As soon as the two came into contact, they quickly merged. The color of the black fog seemed to have become a little thicker. Furthermore, there seemed to be a faint blood-red color in the middle of it. It was just that this blood color was hidden and could not be seen clearly. Then, the same thing happened one after another. Bang! 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 Explosions sounded one after another, and in the blink of an eye, the surrounding subordinates of the Black Demon Cave suffered heavy casualties. One had to know that due to the huge commotion from before, almost everyone in the Black Demon Cave was here. No one expected that these people were not injured because of Chu Luihua and Rong Xiu, nor were they killed because of Diwu Zhangzi. They had all died in the hands of Emo Shiqian. Qi. A stream of warm blood splashed onto Do Min's face. He, who was in a state of deep shock and numbness, suddenly woke up. Run, run. His face was pale, and his voice was trembling. Without any hesitation, he used his fastest speed. However, just as he took half a step forward, the origin power in his body suddenly began to frantically gather towards his origin core. And then bang! Before Do Min could even react, he felt an intense pain, and his body completely dissipated. All the power in his body condensed into a bloody mist and merged with the black mist. At this time, the black fog had become much more solid. Inside, the blood was dense and eerie. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. This Emo Shiqian was more cunning and ruthless than she had imagined. In order to survive, he sacrificed his subordinates without hesitation. In a short while, nearly 1/3 of the people in the Black Demon Cave had died in his hands. In Emo Shiqian's eyes, their lives were just a weight that could increase his chances of escaping. It was not worth mentioning. The power above the black fog became stronger and stronger, and its speed became faster and faster. Diwu Zhangzi had already sealed this space, but he still could not completely control it. The sky fell into chaos. More and more people died, and the smell of blood filled the air. It had almost become an extremely tragic purgatory. The transparent cage followed closely behind, but as Emo Shiqian's soul devoured more and more power, the gap between the two finally began to widen. Diwu Zhangzi's expression hardened. He was about to make a move when he suddenly frowned, and his hand movements stiffened for a moment. Senior Diwu? Rong Xiu immediately sensed that something was wrong. Hearing this, Chu Luihua immediately looked over and realized that Diwu Zhangzi's phantom had become much more transparent than before, and the aura and pressure around him had weakened a lot. Chu Luihua's heart sank. What happened just now? Although Emo Shiqian was still struggling and trying to escape, it should not have much of an impact on Diwu Zhangzi. He looked as if he had suddenly suffered some kind of attack. It's okay. Diwu Zhangzi shook his head, took a deep breath, and gathered power to attack again. However, this short delay gave Emo Shiqian a chance. In midair, a blood-colored totem suddenly appeared. Then, the black fog rushed over quickly, directly breaking through the surrounding space's seal and pressure, and went straight for the blood-colored totem. Rong Xiu sensed that something was wrong, and immediately looked over. His phoenix eyes were stunned, and he directly made a move. Qi! A golden flame flew out, and almost at the moment when the black fog was about to disappear into the blood-colored totem, it violently exploded. Hearing this, Chu Luihua suddenly looked up. At this glance, she only saw that the black fog was fiercely bombarded by Rong Xiu's golden flame. The blood inside seemed to surge again, and there were faint cries of pain ringing in his ears. But in the end, the black fog barely squeezed into the blood-colored totem. Then, the blood-colored totem dissipated instantly. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Many people did not even have time to see the totem before it was over. Hateful. He still escaped. A trace of annoyance appeared on Diwu Zhang's face. Rongxiu shook his head. Senior, don't worry too much. His soul has been seriously injured by me, and it will take a very long time and a lot of energy to recover. Furthermore, his physical body had already been damaged. It would likely be a long time before he stopped moving. Diwu Zhangzi shook his head and sighed. He knew that Rongxiu was comforting him, but he was still a little unwilling. It was not difficult for him to kill Mo Shiqian. If not for just now. Chu Liyue stood at the side and watched this scene, frowning even more. In just a short while, Diwu Zhang's phantom was even more illusory than before. It was as if a gust of wind could blow it away. Compared to when he first appeared, he was as different as heaven and earth. There was really something wrong with him like this. Chu Liyue finally couldn't help but take a step forward, and there was some worry in her eyes. Senior Diwu, what's wrong with you? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2027. Diwu Zhangzi opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but after some hesitation he swallowed his words. Let's find a time to talk about this. For now, let's settle the matter of the Black Demon Cave first. Mo Shiqian abandoned the Black Demon Cave and ran away. Before leaving, he took the lives of nearly half of the people in the Black Demon Cave. Although the remaining half were still alive, they were more or less injured by the impact of Diwu Zhangzi and Mo Shiqian's power. Most importantly, Mo Shiqian's actions had completely destroyed their beliefs and ideas. The ground was littered with broken bones, the strong smell of blood, the messy mountain top. Everything reminded them of what had just happened. Their sect master had sacrificed them in order to win a path of survival for himself. Even if they were all loyal and devoted, even if they were all going through fire and water. But it turned out that in Mo Shiqian's eyes, they were just ants, worthless at all. If he had cared about the Black Demon Cave and the people here at all, he would never have done such a thing. Compared to the destruction of the body, the collapse of one's spirit and beliefs was more likely to cause one to fall into despair and collapse. Chu Liyue looked around. Among the remaining people, a few were venerables, and the rest were basically exalted gods. But at this moment, they all looked equally dejected. Obviously, they no longer had the strength to fight. Diwu Zhang's mind stirred, and the transparent cage suddenly grew in the wind, trapping the remaining people of the Black Demon Cave inside. After Mo Shiqian ran away, the rest of them couldn't run away anymore. You are Rongxiu, come with me. Diwu Zhangzi knew that the two of them had a lot of questions, so after controlling these people, he proposed to have a private discussion with them. Chu Liyue nodded slightly and looked at Chang Wanzhou. Little Zhou, stay here and watch over them first. Also, I'll leave the people below to you. Chang Wanzhou immediately nodded respectfully. Yes. Although he had always been taciturn and had a cold personality, he was extremely smart and knew how to deal with these things. Although he had been injured before, his recovery ability was very strong, so it was not a big problem. Chu Liyue thought for a moment, then shouted again. Dumpling. Light flashed before his eyes, and Dumpling reverted from her true form to her human form. She raised her small face. You stay here and help keep watch. After all, Chang Wanzhou was injured. With Dumpling around, it would be an extra layer of protection. In fact, Dumpling had already expected her thoughts. She immediately nodded and responded crisply. Good. Chu Liyue and the other two soon arrived at the mountain where Mo Shiqian appeared. This was also the center of the entire Black Demon Cave. Usually, there was a barrier around the mountain. Except for Mo Shiqian, no one else was allowed to enter. But now that Mo Shiqian had run away, his body was destroyed, and his soul was damaged, the enchantment naturally broke on its own. At the top of the mountain, there was a magnificent palace. It was obvious that it belonged to Mo Shiqian. As soon as they approached, a faint smell of blood spread from it. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Rongxiu flicked his finger, and a golden flame quickly flew out, forming a line of fire around the palace and surrounding it. As the flame burned, a strange sizzling sound kept coming. At the same time, there was also an unpleasant smell. Chu Luiyue frowned even more. Diwu Zhangzi sneered. It seems that Mo Shiqian left a lot of dirty things behind. About 15 minutes later, the flames gradually extinguished. A gentle breeze blew by, and that unbearable smell finally dissipated. Even the smell of blood in the air disappeared. Rongxiu took the lead. The three of them directly entered the palace. Walking into the palace, Chu Luiyue quickly looked around. The ornaments and decorations here were all extremely luxurious. Treasures that couldn't be found outside could be seen everywhere here. It was obvious how extravagant his daily life was. It seems that even after evacuating from the Divine Ruins world, Mo Shiqian's life is still quite comfortable. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and smiled. If they hadn't come here by accident, they didn't know when they would be able to fight Mo Shiqian head-on. He was hiding here really well. The Black Demon Cave has never been short of money. Diwu Zhangzi snorted. Over the years, countless cultivators have been bewitched by them, thinking that as long as they join them, they can soar into the sky and become a top expert in the world. For this, they didn't hesitate to go bankrupt and pay an endless price. But they don't know that this is not a paradise for cultivation, but a purgatory. He knew quite a bit about the Black Demon Cave. Although he hadn't been in contact with them for a long time, it was still the same old thing today. After so many years, the inheritance of the Black Demon Cave had never been broken. Chu Luiyue nodded in agreement. Disregarding everything else, weren't the dozens of cultivators outside here for this very reason? Although there aren't many people in the Black Demon Cave, they don't seem weak. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and said strangely, even if they are carefully selected geniuses, it's still a little beyond common sense. Even a first-rate aristocratic family like Yin Tianke only had a handful of venerate gods in its ranks. However, venerable gods seem to be very common in the Black Demon Cave. However, the strength of these people seems to be slightly weaker than ordinary cultivators of the same level. Chu Luiyue thought of the scene when he fought with those people. Hongyan was fine, but although Do Min was in the venerable god realm, the strength he displayed was barely satisfactory. Not to mention a top existence like Yi Wentao, he couldn't even compare to ordinary venerable gods. You're right. Compared to real cultivators, they are indeed a lot worse. Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue asked curiously, real cultivators? This meant, was he referring to those people in the Black Demon Cave? Rongxiu raised his chin. There was a huge wall in front of them. We'll know what's going on when we go in. There was a door on both sides of the wall. The door was unlocked and opened with a push. But thinking about it carefully, it wasn't difficult to understand. Most of the time, only Mo Shiqian was here. He didn't need to worry that someone would come here. After breaking through the door, creak, the door opened, and Rongxiu walked in first. Diwu Zhangzi and Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. When he saw the scene in front of him, Chu Luiyue was stunned. The space behind the wall was extremely empty, without any extra objects. Except for a sand table in the middle. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2028. On the sand table, the mountain range was lush and undulating. With just one look, Chu Luiyue immediately recognized that this was the sand table in Black Fiend Cave's territory. She walked closer and saw that there were blood spots on the small mountain peaks, flickering with a faint glow. Chu Luiyue focused her gaze and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the blood spots actually contained a faint suppression. Suddenly, she turned her gaze and found that a mountain peak beside her had collapsed. This was the mountain that Hongyan had brought them to in the beginning. The mountain outside had collapsed, so the model on the sand table had also changed. This, Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something and sucked in a cold breath. This sand table is connected to the outside world. Rongxiu finished her sentence. His tone was not surprised, and his expression was indifferent, as if he had already expected this. Mo Shiqian can control everything outside through the sand table, And what happens outside will be quickly reflected on this sand table, so that Mo Shurqian can quickly know. This was why even if he did not come out, and did not listen to any reports from the servants, he still knew what was happening outside. Chu Luyue nodded in understanding, and looked at the sand table carefully, but the waves in her heart did not calm down for a long time. Mo Shurqian was really a very capable person. Cough, cough, cough. Diwu Zhangzi suddenly coughed. Chu Luyue came back to her senses and hurried forward. Senior Diwu, how are you? She had felt that his condition was a little strange just now, but now his aura seemed to be weaker. Diwu Zhangzi waved his hand. I'm fine, I'm fine. This aura has been trapped for many years. Now that it's out, it's inevitable that I'm not used to it. I'll be fine after resting for a while. How could Chu Luyue not be worried? She didn't believe a single word of the reason he gave her. After pondering for a moment, Chu Luyue asked, did something happen in the Red Moon Desert? Diwu Zhangzi paused and subconsciously wanted to deny it. What? Before he finished speaking, he looked up and met a pair of dark and bright eyes. Those eyes were as bright as stars, as if they had seen through everything. Diwu Zhangzi could not say the rest of his words. After hesitating for a moment, he sighed deeply. Recently, there has been some trouble in the Red Moon Desert. In the past, the old man's aura was sealed in the Blood Heaven realm, and had no connection with the soul under the Red Moon Desert, so it was not affected. But now that he has broken out of the Blood Heaven realm, he will inevitably be implicated. Implicated? Chu Luyue inexplicably felt. Diwu Zhangzi seemed to be weighing his words. Although the old man isn't weak, he doesn't have a divine body. So many things aren't very convenient for him. Chu Luyue's heart fell. Otherwise, with the strength of Diwu Zhangzi and the other two, how could they have been injured? Moreover, during this period of time, there had been no news from Dabeo. Diwu Zhangzi comforted her. Girl, don't worry. It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Chu Luyue stared straight at him. Diwu Zhangzi suddenly could not say the rest of his words. After a long while, he finally shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. Girl, you're too smart. Nothing could be hidden from her. Chu Luyue said. I'll go back with you and help you and Senior Lan Xiao refine the divine body. She was the one who helped refine Dabeo's divine body. Now that she was much stronger than before, she should be more confident. She originally planned to go to the Red Moon Desert after the matter in the Peach Blossom Dock was over. Now is the time. Diwu Zhangzi shook his head. Girl, you can't go now. Can't. Why? Chu Luyue was puzzled. She had been to the Red Moon Desert many times, and it was just outside the Divine Ruins world. She could reach there quickly without crossing the Gate Realm. Diwu Zhangzi paused for a moment. Lan Xiao and I are not as strong as Dabeo. Therefore, even with your help, we still won't be able to refine our divine bodies in our current state. Even if you go, it'll be in vain. Moreover, the Red Moon Desert is in a dangerous period now. Any powerhouse below the level of a venerable god will die without a trace. If you go. Chu Luyue was stunned, then she lowered her head slightly. She knew about the dangerous period of the Red Moon Desert. Every 100 years, the Red Moon Desert would be shrouded by the blood moon for a month. Generally speaking, when the blood moon appeared, Dabeo and the other two could come out from underground and wander around freely. But the dangerous period was different. During that month, the entire desert was dark and blood-red, and the energy of heaven and earth was violent. It was extremely dangerous. That was why it was called the dangerous period. I know that your strength has increased greatly, and you can even fight against a venerable god powerhouse. But you're not a real venerable god after all. As long as you haven't broken through that threshold, you can't enter the Red Moon Desert during the dangerous period. Diwu Zhangzi sighed. During this month, the three of us can't even take care of ourselves, let alone take care of you. If those two guys know that I brought you back, it'll really cause a ruckus. In the end, it was because they were worried about her. Chu Luyue's thoughts turned. Dangerous period. No wonder there was no news from Dabeo for so long. He was really delayed. But, Senior Diwu, I remember Senior Lan Xiao mentioned before that the last dangerous period of the Red Moon Desert was less than 100 years ago, right? Chu Luyue asked uncertainly. She had heard Lan Xiao mention the dangerous period a few years ago in the Red Moon Desert. Hearing what he said, it didn't seem to have happened that long ago. If it had been 100 years, he wouldn't have said it in that tone. But she didn't ask for the exact time, so she could only guess. Diwu Zhangzi was stunned. Then he cursed in his heart. Lan Xiao can't keep his mouth shut. Isn't it enough for him to be obsessed with my beauty every day? Why is he still so talkative? And he's talking about such important things. Can I let you know about this? You're right. It's indeed less than 100 years since the last dangerous period. But the energy of heaven and earth in the Red Moon Desert has always been unstable. The so-called 100 years is actually just a rough estimate and not accurate. This time, it might also be related to Debao's recondensing of the divine body. Diwu Zhangzi explained. Disregarding everything else, the last sentence was true. Chu Luo thought about it, and this explanation seemed to make sense. Then, you should stay in Peach Blossom Cove during this period of time. It won't be too late for you to go after the dangerous period. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2029. Seeing Diwu Zhangzi's insistence, Chu Luo had no choice but to agree. Then, I'll wait for your news. Diwu Zhangzi secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Yes. During this period of time, you can prepare the things first. The old man is fine, but Lan Xiao is a little troublesome. You know that he's always very picky about his face. If he wants to condense a divine body, he'll need a lot of things. Then, he mentioned some of the herbs and other things that he needed. Chu Luo's eyebrows relaxed. Don't worry, Peach Blossom Doc has all these things. Diwu Zhangzi nodded in relief. Then it's settled. Chu Luo naturally agreed. But there was still one more tricky thing. Then your aura. Even if he was a top powerhouse, such an aura still needed to be attached to something to be completely preserved. Since the Blood Heaven realm was gone, he had to find the next one as soon as possible. Diwu Zhangzi waved his hand indifferently. It doesn't matter, as long as it's a venerable artifact. He knew that with Chu Luo and Rongxiu's wealth, they could still afford a venerable artifact. But that wasn't what Chu Luo was worried about. She hesitated for a moment but still spoke. Senior Diwu, I have a lot of venerable artifacts here. But, even if you can hide them, how will you return to the Red Moon Desert? The expression on Diwu Zhangzi's face instantly froze. Obviously, he had also neglected this problem. He frowned as he felt a headache coming on. I'll escort you back. Rongxiu's deep and pleasant voice sounded. Chu Luo and Diwu Zhangzi looked at him at the same time. Rongxiu smiled faintly. There shouldn't be a more suitable candidate than me. Senior Diwu, what do you think? Chu Luo immediately understood. That's right. Rongxiu was now a venerable god powerhouse. Of course, he could go to the Red Moon Desert. Diwu Zhangzi nodded immediately. Yes, you can go together. Chu Luo's anxious heart also relaxed. With Rongxiu accompanying him, there shouldn't be any problems. If she wanted to go to the Red Moon Desert, she would have to either wait for the dangerous months to pass, or break through to the god realm. In comparison, the former was easier to achieve. She had just condensed a divine body not long ago, and now she wanted to cross the threshold of the god realm. It was a bit exaggerated. As if seeing that she was still a little uneasy, Diwu Zhangzi comforted her. Little Yuer, you don't have to be too worried. With your talent, it won't be long before you become a god. He spoke with absolute certainty and sincerity. It was as if he could already see that day. Chu Luo couldn't help but smile. You really think highly of me. All along, De Bao and the others have been especially fond of her. At the same time, their expectations were also extremely high. In the eyes of others, there were many things that were impossible to do, but they seemed to think that she could do it. Of course, she did it all. Although she had suffered a lot in the process, now that she thought about it, she had indeed benefited a lot. She tilted her head and looked thoughtfully at Rongxiu. Speaking of which, Rongxiu's cultivation seemed to be very smooth. A few years ago, He had already broken through to the god realm, and had 2 divine bodies. Not long ago, he directly broke through to the god realm in the god-slaying mound. The gap that was as difficult as climbing the sky for thousands of cultivators was easily crossed by him. Chu Luiyue had never seen Rong Xiu worry about cultivation. It seemed that he could break through as long as he wanted to. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. Rong Xiu asked with great interest. What are you laughing at? Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. I'm thinking. Now everyone says that I'm so talented that I can fight a god in the god realm. However, what they don't know is that compared to me, your talent is likely stronger, not weaker. She suddenly leaned closer and asked with a teasing smile. Your Highness, why do I feel that cultivation isn't that challenging for you at all? If I didn't know that you were dreaming, I would have thought that you could break through at will as long as you want. Diwu Zhangzi looked up at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's smile deepened as he gently caressed her head. What are you talking about? Chu Luiyue was originally just joking, so she shrugged her shoulders and smiled. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed and looked at the sand table again. I wonder where Imo Shirqian escaped to this time. Chu Luiyue's heart sank when she heard this. Imo Shirqian's physical body had been destroyed, and only a soul was left. This was even more difficult to find. The world inside and outside the divine ruins was vast. Who knew what he would do next? She followed Rong Xiu's gaze and suddenly narrowed her eyes. She walked closer and saw that the originally flickering blood-red light on the destroyed mountain peak had already dimmed. There were some other spots next to it that were the same. The light was dim, and there was no vitality. Imo Shirqian's cultivation should also be based on this sand table. Diwu Zhangzi also walked over and said in a deep voice. To be precise, the entire Black Demon Cave is like this. Chu Luiyue recalled everything that had happened before and fell into deep thought. They set up Xian formations everywhere, and used various methods to lure those cultivators in. Finally, they devoured their power to increase their own cultivation? Diwu Zhangzi nodded solemnly. That's right. Almost all of their power comes from this. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2030. Using this method to forcibly plunder the power of others could greatly increase the speed of cultivation and allow one to complete the breakthrough of various levels in an extremely short period of time. Compared to ordinary cultivation methods, this method was definitely a shortcut. This was also the usual method of the Black Demon Cave. Diwu Zhangzi shook his head. Back then, only Mo Yao and a few others used this method. I didn't expect their entire sect to have fallen into the mire of greed. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. This also explained her previous doubts. Using this method to cultivate, the experts of the Black Demon Cave emerged extremely quickly. But because they did not cultivate with their own true abilities, the power they obtained was mixed and modeled, and their combat strength was extremely weak. How could there be a shortcut on the path of cultivation? In order to expand their forces, the Black Demon Cave made everyone use this method to cultivate. Although it could greatly expand the sect in a short period of time, it was not a solution in the long run. For example, while there were many gods present today, only a few of them were actually capable of fighting. Once they encountered a powerful one, they would immediately be defeated. It was just a shell. What do you plan to do with those people outside? Diwu Zhangzi asked. Mo Shirqian killed a group when he left, but there were still hundreds of people outside. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled slightly. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. After Chu Luiyue and the others entered the hall, everyone gathered together. Above the almost raised ruins, a red-gold flame burned brightly, like a wall, dividing the crowd into 2 parts. On one side was Ziji and the others who came to participate in the trial, and on the other side were the remnants of the Black Demon Cave. At this time, they were all trapped in a transparent cage. Dumpling and Chang Wanzhou were in charge of guarding. Chang Wanzhou stood with his sword in his arms. His body was stained with a lot of blood, and he looked quite wretched. However, he stood straight as if he would never bend, and would not be defeated by any force. His delicate and beautiful face was indifferent and cold, without any expression. It was already evening. The afterglow of the sun shone on his body, and his soft golden short hair fluttered in the wind like a painting. Suddenly, Chang Wanzhou felt a small hand pulling at his clothes. Xiaozhou, Xiaozhou? He lowered his head. Dumpling was looking up at him curiously. What's up? Chang Wanzhou didn't want to say anything, but he remembered that Dumpling was Chu Liyue's contracted magical beast, so he opened his mouth. His voice was as cold as ever. However, it wasn't the first day that Dumpling knew him, so she didn't mind. She grinned. Her grape-like eyes seemed to be glowing, dazzling and bright. Little Zhou, tell me, how did you recover so quickly? If she didn't sense it wrongly, Chang Wanzhou's injuries were already mostly healed. It was also because of this that Dumpling made up her mind to come over and ask for clarification. That's all you want to ask? Chang Wanzhou was a little surprised. Dumpling nodded quickly. She was really curious. One had to know that Chang Wanzhou had been seriously injured when he fought with Mo Shiqian. His external and internal injuries were quite serious. But it had only been 2 hours, and he was almost healed. Dumpling was a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and she had the purest bloodline. Her body was extremely resistant to beatings, and her recovery ability was unparalleled. There were very few people in the world who could compare to her. However, Chang Wanzhou was one of them. That was why she was particularly curious. Chang Wanzhou had always looked thin and weak on the surface. How could he? It's been like this since I became a great deity. Chang Wanzhou was silent for a moment before answering. Dumpling was stunned. That's it. That's it. Chang Wanzhou's answer was very boring, and it seemed that he had no intention of continuing to explain. Dumpling tugged at his clothes again, and still refused to give up. Then is it because your divine body is very powerful? I haven't condensed a divine body yet. Chang Wanzhou spoke, directly blocking Dumpling's remaining words. She smacked her lips and scratched her head. No divine body? Then that shouldn't be. Chang Wanzhou wasn't a divine beast. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to recover so quickly. Moreover, his great deity strength seemed to be very strong. Dumpling raised her head again and stared at him for a long time, puzzled. Chang Wanzhou's expression was indifferent, and he didn't say anything else. He really had nothing to say, because what he said just now was the truth. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't notice the problem with his body. It was just that he had been thinking about Chu Liyue before, so he didn't think too much about it. At this time, Tuanzi's words reminded him, but he didn't have an answer. Oh, Dumpling suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. My hand is frozen. Chang Wanzhou lowered his head and saw that there was a thin layer of ice on her little hand. He frowned. Dumpling also raised her head and looked at him with a shocked expression. Just now, she only tugged at his clothes, and there was no ice on his body. How a reddish gold flame quickly burned, and the thin layer of ice quickly melted. This bit of cold air didn't pose a threat to Dumpling, but the reddish gold heavenly phoenix was an existence of the purest yang. Ordinary cold air couldn't cause her body to freeze. Dumpling suddenly thought of something and widened her eyes slightly. The cold in your body. Before she could finish, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. It was Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu who had returned. Seeing Dumpling and Chang Wanzhou's expressions, Chu Liyue was a little surprised. What's wrong? What are you talking about? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2031. Chang Wanzhou said, It's nothing. Dumpling pouted and swallowed the rest of her words. She was smart and could tell that Chang Wanzhou didn't want to talk about it, so she didn't want to continue asking. Anyway, there would be time and opportunities to find out in the future. Ayu. Dumpling happily threw herself at Chu Liyue. She was still young, and she still had some childishness. Other than Chu Liyue, her heart could not contain anything else. Now that she saw Chu Liyue, she immediately forgot about other things and people. Chu Liyue lowered his head and smiled as he patted Dumpling's head. Ayu, when are we going to the Red Moon Desert? Dumpling asked curiously. The matter here had come to an end. They should be leaving soon? Chu Luiyue shook his head. Let's go back to Peach Blossom Dock first. We'll go after a while. Oh. Dumpling was a little surprised, but she didn't think much of it. No matter where they went, it didn't make any difference to her. Anyway, she just needed to follow Ayu. Chu Luiyue pinched her chubby little face, then looked up at Chang Wanzhou. Master. Chang Wanzhou bowed. Chu Luiyue looked at him steadily, and a hint of as expected flashed in his eyes. Previously, she found that Chang Wanzhou's recovery ability was amazing. It hadn't been long, but his aura was basically back to normal. She suppressed this thought, and turned her gaze to look at the people trapped in the transparent cage. And those people were looking at her at this time. Fear, despair, uneasiness. Everyone had different expressions, but they were obviously in awe and fear of Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu, who had appeared again. After what happened before, everyone now understood that these two people were the most dangerous people in the world to provoke. Not only was his strength extraordinary, but his background was also extraordinary. Then he thought about the things that had spread throughout the Divine Ruins world. How could they not feel uneasy? Some people were looking behind the two of them, but they didn't see Diwu Zhangzi. After all, the exquisite technique was left behind by him. If he didn't show up, then they— Sorry to trouble you, Senior. Chu Luiyue said softly. Diwu Zhangzi's voice was heard instantly. It's just a small matter. What's so troublesome about it? Just as he finished speaking, the transparent cage suddenly began to tighten. The lines seemed to be under the control of some kind of power, quickly twisting and changing shape. No. Some people realized that something was wrong, and fear flashed across their faces. Even if they were extremely disappointed in the Black Demon Cave and Mo Shiqian, it would be a lie to say that they had no intention of surviving. In the face of life and death, not many people could remain calm. However, before he could finish shouting, he stopped abruptly. That person's figure completely disappeared into the intertwined transparent lines. More than one person had such an encounter. In the exquisite technique, everyone who was still alive was trapped in the Black Demon Cave. At this time, under Diwu Zhangzi's control, they were all killed by the exquisite technique. They didn't have the strength to fight back at all. Most people didn't even have the chance to make a sound before their souls were destroyed. On the ground, the color of blood spread out, and then quickly disappeared. The transparent cage became smaller and smaller, and finally, after a quarter of an hour, it returned to the size of a palm. There was complete silence. Iziji and the others were only separated by a wall of fire. Everyone watched this scene in silence. In fact, most people were already numb. Previously, when Mo Shiqian was escaping, he used the lives of countless subordinates to build momentum for himself. His methods were ruthless, and the scene was tragic. In comparison, dying silently in the exquisite technique was much better. After seeing a hellish scene, it was much easier for him to accept other things. Only the thick smell of blood in the air showed what had just happened here. Swoosh! Rong Xiu raised his wrist slightly, and the exquisite technique flew into his sleeve. Now, Diwu Zhangzi had attached himself to a venerable artifact again. At this time, that thing was on Rong Xiu. Hence, when Diwu Zhangzi summoned the Linglong technique back, it was naturally through Rong Xiu. Many people subconsciously looked in the direction of the exquisite technique, but as soon as their eyes landed on the figure in white, they hurriedly looked away. They didn't even dare to look at his face. This man was noble and unparalleled, looking down on the world. Even if he was just standing there casually, he still exuded pride and nobility from his bones. This small space was created by the Black Demon Cave using extraordinary means. Now that the Blood Heaven realm is broken, Mo Shiqian fled, and the people of the Black Demon Cave were annihilated, there is no longer any support here, and will soon collapse. You should leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue said. Just now in the hall, Rong Xiu and she had worked together to completely destroy the sand table. This place would soon become a ruin, or even cease to exist. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. In fact, it wasn't that they didn't expect this outcome, but when they heard it, they couldn't help but feel a little complicated. After all, They had all come with great ambitions at the beginning. They thought that after passing the trial, they would be able to enter the divine ruins world and get a better chance to cultivate. Who knew that it would end like this? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. The barrier over there is already very weak. You can all leave directly. With that, she looked at Rong Xiao. They also had to part ways and leave. Be careful, Chu Luiyue said. Rong Xiao nodded, his eyes deep. I'll be back soon. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. In fact, with Rong Xiao's speed, it wouldn't take too long to get to the Red Moon Desert from here. Moreover, his strength was extraordinary, so there was nothing to worry about. Okay, then I'll wait for you at the Peach Blossom Cove. Rong Xiao's eyes flashed. Anyway, there's nothing urgent over there. I'll send you her off first. Although he knew that Chu Luiyue wasn't weak now, he still couldn't rest assured. Only by sending her back personally could he feel at ease. Chu Luiyue understood what he was thinking, so she didn't reject him. She thought for a while and said, Okay, we'll go back through the Gate Realm over there. She was naturally referring to the Dao Gate Realm, behind the Black Demon Cave Mountains. When they came, the power in the Gate Realm went berserk, causing the void to tremble, and finally sent them out of Cloud State City. If they went back now, it would be impossible to find the way back. The best way was to go back through this Gate Realm first. Rong Xiao nodded. After the two discussed everything, they didn't hesitate anymore and directly set off. However, just as they turned around and didn't have time to take a step, they suddenly heard someone shout behind them. Both of you, please wait. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and looked back. The one who spoke was Hiziji. Is there anything else? Hiziji took a deep breath, as if he was still a little nervous, and then directly knelt down. Hiziji and my sister's lives were saved by Your Highness the Holy Sun and Your Highness the Princess. If you don't mind in the future, Hiziji is willing to follow the two of you and serve you faithfully. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.